Wish we weren't here, but at least the system worked.
Well, the
You know
whole
what I mean?
time that we're doing this, Donna has been texting me the whole time we've been preparing and everything else. And she keeps saying, Ashley, we got to get her. We got to get her. And the only thought in my head when that verdict comes across is we got her. That's it. That's all I can think. And that just had to sit there with it. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at Tom. I'm in total disbelief. I'm like, holy crap. Like,
We did it.
we did it. We did what nobody thought could be done.
Welcome to Creepalachia. It has finally arrived. Me and Jozy get to talk to Wonder Woman herself, Ashley Acord, and the now famous with his projector skills, Tom Truman. Thank you for joining us in the studio today. I'm so excited for this conversation. So, let's get into some background first. Let's start with Ashley. So, Ashley, how did you get into law?
Honestly, I wanted to be a prosecutor when I was in high school, but I went to college. I studied animal science. I graduated and I said, I really don't want to go to vet school. What else could I do? And law school was the only viable alternative for me. So here we are.
Sweet. What about you, Tom? I know you've had some experience. Was you a prosecutor before this time?
I was a prosecutor from
For like 20 years?
1981.
81 till...
Well, I came and left the office a few times. I was there initially hired by Bruce Lazenby in 81. I left in 83. I came back in 89. I left again when Judge Dimlick got elected. I was his clerk. I came back in 21 and retired in 22.
Sweet.
You just couldn't get away.
Couldn't get away. Godfather 3.
And Jozy, ask some questions. I got to adjust your camera. So
Okay.
go right ahead.
So when did you come on into the Raleigh County Prosecuting Attorney's office?
I believe it was July 2023.
What were you initially like? Was there a specific like caseload that you were meant to focus on, or like talk about a little bit about that?
I was hired to be a felony level prosecutor
Mhm.
in circuit court. So in our office, each of the 4 felony prosecutors is assigned to one of the circuit judges. I was assigned to Judge Burnside, and I handled his felony docket.
Nice. Why did you get into law?
I got into law because I couldn't really decide what else to do, honestly. It was something that I knew I could be good at. So I figured I might as well give it a shot. And if I don't like it, then I'll try something else. And it was just something that kind of stuck.
Well, you're doing pretty daggone good, if I must say. Tom, what about you? Why did you decide to tackle the legal side of things?
This started when I was in 8th grade during Christmas break. To show you how different things were, my parents put me on a commuter train in Northwest Indiana. I rode it into downtown Chicago and met with my Aunt Gail, who worked at a huge Chicago law firm. And she says, hey, you want to see a trial? And I said, yeah. There was one going on. It was a long trial about the damage done by tranquilizers given to pregnant women. And I went over there and I went back every day during Christmas break. It was still going on at spring break, and I went back every day after that. I met the judge's bailiff. He let me use the judge's bathroom. I was in love. I was hooked on the legal system right then and there.
Right. Have y'all ever ran into a judge as cool as Judge Kirk?
No. Because if you look in the encyclopedia next to judge, his picture should be there. He is the consummate gentleman, great judge, very fair. And he's a huge loss, his retirement is, to the Raleigh County judicial system.
Yeah. How long was he a judge?
He started in
30?
95, I think.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. It was 30 years.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you not taking several months to try this Natalie Cochran case. I know it's been done before, but
exactly.
that would have been interesting.
Well, Matthew Victor was saying 7 weeks, 7 weeks. I said, Matthew, this is Raleigh County, buddy. We don't do that. And they do it in Charleston, but we don't.
Right.
What are some of like the other major cases? Obviously, I don't think we've had another case on court TV, but like you personally, what are some other big cases that you've done in this county that have gone to trial?
I spent my entire prosecutor career as the equivalent of a backup catcher. Whatever the office needed, that's what I did. And so if there was something that needed to be tried, I was the guy to do it. The only exception to that, probably of a higher profile nature, was David Lettingham, who was charged with trying to kill then Judge, later Justice Hutchison. And that one was quite a higher profile.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Case from my usual fare.
Yeah. This is so interesting. And I'm about to die. I have a gift for you, Tom. Okay. I've been roasting just to show you your gift. And this may be cringy, which is great too. But all right.
There we go.
I got the Tom Truman collection
There we go.
going in the studio today, and also I have
Matthew
the coat
The Victor jacket.
to match. Oh goodness gracious! All right, I've been dying, so I had to get that out of the way. But yeah, I gotta say, suit game's on point. I don't know if it's as good as Selden's.
Yeah.
Selden's is pretty good.
And since obviously we can't leave Ashley out,
Oh yeah,
so
another gift.
Yeah. It's not as intricate. Sorry. Let's see. Okay. Ugh. There we go.
Perfect.
Absolutely perfect.
Nice.
Yeah. So we look the part today. I need to take these sweatpants off. Hang on. That's going to be awkward, but I got dress pants on too. And also, I don't know if y'all saw, but we have the socks.
I love the socks.
The socks are great.
Faces. So we are fully ready to talk some law. I feel professional.
There we go.
First question would be, Tom, have you ever gave the finger to anyone ever? I'm just curious.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I'm sure I have. Yeah.
I've wondered that. And we, I don't know if y'all could talk about fingergate, but
I would be glad to, because there's a lot of misinformation running around. I know exactly when that happened. Matthew Victor and Ashley and I were just sitting there waiting for, I think, the penalty phase verdict.
Mhm.
And Matthew was talking about his days as a law clerk in the Supreme Court. And he was talking about the internal tensions with the different justices. And there was one chain smoking justice who wanted to take a case, and there was his polar opposite on the other side. And he said, "I refuse." And Matthew made the gesture.
Okay.
And Rick Barbero caught him at the wrong time.
well,
But it was not in any way like it's being portrayed.
perfect. And we kind of got some inside info of like, okay, because people were starting to freak out, like thinking he was, flipping off the jury or the judge. And I was like, no. It was before anyone ever came out. So to clarify, you heard it here first. Well, for the third time, that it was all in fun, I guess, as unprofessional as it possibly could have been. But yeah, okay. So you have gave the finger. Any certain instance come to mind? It's just, is it sports related?
No. Well, it could have been. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's a possibility.
Good deal. All right. So, Natalie Cochran trial. Tom, we'll start with you first. When was you first made aware of Natalie Cochran at all?
When I went back to the prosecutor's office in 21, the case was just kind of run by me, and I was not all that impressed at the time. That's the first time.
Sure. Okay.
What was like your initial thought though? Like, did you think it'd be too hard to prove, or like what did you think about it when you first?
The way
saw
it was presented to me was kind of in a traditional murder case sense,
Mhm.
and I thought, boy, the state's got a huge hill to climb with that.
Little did you know.
Yeah, unbeknownst
It
to
was-
me. But
Yeah. One thing I forgot to print out was the big 0 on the piece
Oh
of
yeah,
paper.
that was a good one.
Yeah. My goodness. What about you, Ashley? When was you first made aware? Because you started, what year did you start?
I started at the prosecutor's office in 2023.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
But I actually was a public defender before that. And when that office had to conflict out of the case, out of actually defending her, it was already done before I got there. But that was when I actually first became aware of the case at all. So it's interesting because I had not seen anything like as far as files go about the case before I was a prosecutor, but that was how I kind of learned about it, was just people talking about it. And I was like, wow, this is really something, because I didn't know any of these people. I've lived in Beckley my whole life, but I did not know the Cochrans or the Bolts or any of them before this came around. So this was all brand new to me.
Sure. I was the same way, which really, I didn't really, literally when I started watching the trial, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I just heard someone say Humalog won't kill a body. Like, wait, this is and then I just started thinking like, diving into the rabbit hole, I guess. So what state was the case, and whoever can take this, Tom, if you want to take this, what state was the case in when it was handed to you? Because a lot of people don't know, but you were handed this case in September of last year, right?
Right.
Okay.
It really was far different than the end product. The state's witness list was 85, and I'm not really sure what the state's theory was to win the case at that time. But after a few weeks, it became readily apparent that a traditional murder case analysis was not going to work. That was kind of the opinion I formed when it was first run by me, but that was definitely when it was our responsibility. And Dominic and Jimmy had assigned Ashley to the case. So she was involved, or not involved, but assigned when I got there. And you talk about a blessing. It worked. But we totally changed the approach to the case between all of us.
Can you who were some of the witnesses that I guess were on the initial list? Was it more like family and friends? Was it more like doctors? Like, how did you go about dwindling it down to, I think, 20 or so?
To be honest with you, I didn't count the last time. I mean, it couldn't be.
In the teens somewhere.
Yeah, it was in the teens somewhere. There were a bunch of doctors, and there was really nothing to be gained by calling them. And there were more Ponzi scheme victims, and there was not much to be gained by them either. Mm-hmm. A big breakthrough time-wise was when the defense stipulated to two things: chain of custody of the physical evidence, and that was a monumental time saver, and it would have accomplished nothing.
What do you mean by that? What's for those who don't know?
Normally, the state would be required to produce witnesses of everybody who touched any of the physical evidence in the case. Well, this stuff went from one federal agent to a state agent to another federal agent to Quantico, Virginia, back, and it would have been just tedious, unnecessary stuff. So to the defense credit, they stipulate, once we took a few hours and went over every detail with them, and again, to their credit, they stipulated to all of that. And the other stipulation that they made, chain of custody and
authenticity of the medical records.
Right. We did not have to produce record keepers for any documentation, which that was another, I mean, it's an anachronistic part of the law that you still do some of this stuff. There's really no reason to doubt the authenticity of a lot of the evidence, but to say you have to bring some person who has no idea other than to say, my job is to keep this record. And that was it. And they stipulated to that too.
Huh. Interesting. So I got to apologize too. I was critical on, and I'd like to talk about an overview of your all's approach. I was a little worried early on for the lack of objections on the state's part. And I know nothing. I dropped out of college. Like, I'm not a lawyer in any sense of the word, but I just was thinking like, well, a lot of these things, that are being said, I think we could object to because, I thought Victor was just implying that Humalog wouldn't have been possible to kill Michael Cochran, and there was different things. But my apology comes in that I think by the end, the difference in the approach between your all's approach to the case and the defense's approach was so far apart from each other that it really separated you all and made the narrative that Ashley ended up presenting on the close that much clearer, if that makes sense. Was that a goal of yours to kind of let the jury decide a lot of these things, or not to throw mud in it, or not to confuse anyone, or what was?
I think a couple things. There are expectations primarily from movies and TV where the lawyers come right out of central casting and make objections to all sorts of things. Probably decades ago, I decided if this testimony is not hurting my case, I don't care if I could make an objection or not. I'm going to let it go. And if it's actually helping me, I'm absolutely going to let it go. And that was true in both cases. Now, Ashley's going to have to find her own way on this. How is she going to go about that? But that was pretty much my approach and has been for a long time.
Well, that's great. So you ultimately decide if you're going to object. It's not like, well, Ashley can throw up an objection. It's kind of the prosecutor, the lead prosecutor kind of.
No, I'm not saying that. In fact, we divided up the witnesses on a fairly even basis. So if it was Ashley's witness or it was Ashley to cross their witness, that was her, whatever way Ashley wanted to do it was fine. I'm just giving you my
gotcha. That's
my approach.
Well, that makes sense, because at the end I was like, well, this is where experience comes in, because I'm an idiot, and the separation between you and the defense was just so clear to me. I was like, oh well, and then but in turn, when you object, it's taken more seriously because it didn't happen nearly as much as the defense. But I talked to a friend who's a lawyer, and he said, well, basically it works like this. If it's the law, if you're a defense lawyer, if it's the law, you pound the law. If it's the truth, you pound the truth. And if it's something else, you pound the table. And he said there was a lot of pounding the table going on. So I think the jury saw right through that, which we interviewed them. And it basically was apparent that it didn't work out to throw all those smoke and mirrors in a lot of these things.
What's kind of like, so obviously some of the objections were somewhat funny, especially from Stanley. Because obviously we saw that like Stanley was doing all the medical witnesses. And I remember, the defense had tried multiple times to get that vial of insulin thrown out. And then when it's about to be presented, he immediately objects. And you're just like, really? Like, we haven't gotten there yet. The judge is like, calm down. But like, so how, like, I don't know. Is it weird to like not throw humor into it, but just kind of like show the jury that like you're not as worried about the defense, or that like, you think they're a little bit absurd, or how to,
Well, you've covered a lot of ground. But there was a comment made to Stanley on one of his objections, and that was unprofessional. I shouldn't have done that. But it was one of those, you really, at some point, you just can't believe this is your objection at this time. But it was, and it got overruled, and we rolled on down the tracks.
That was towards the end, right?
It was in the medical part.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or just, it was actually the FBI, one guy.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Well, I think y'all held the professionalism really well, because I was unglued in my house just throwing stuff. I'm like, what are we doing? But, and again, that's not why I'm in any type of professional. That's why I'm here yakking in my basement, with two of the coolest legal people I've ever met.
But he
Naturally,
met
no.
3 in his life. This is
I
good.
mean, yeah, you know, I may need you one day. No, hope not. But so Ashley, kind of an overview question for you, and then we'll get into like day-to-day trial specifics. How long did it take for you to write the close? Did you have some help? How did you put that together? It was about 45 minutes. I mean, you had it to the minute.
You did, yeah.
That was actually interesting the way that worked out, because we originally asked for like 30 minutes or something. And I sat there and I started thinking about it. I started talking to people, and I was like, because I had just practiced it that morning on a couple of our legal assistants, and I texted and I was like, hey, how long did I go? And they said 43 minutes. And I was like, oh no. I was like, we got to ask for more time. But as far as preparing it, I had been kind of working on it the entire trial. I was taking down a lot of notes, things that witnesses had said that I wanted to make sure that I brought back up. It took about a full weekend to write the whole outline of it. And then Bob Heinzman and my husband and I got together at our office the weekend prior to closing arguments. And we worked for about 5 hours on that PowerPoint. And then I worked on it a little bit longer on my own. But it took a few days to nail it down. I'll be honest, I only rehearsed it like in full one time because I was like, I can't get used to it.
You only did it once?
I only did it once.
Wow.
And because my fear was that if I got too used to doing it, it would lose the emotion that I wanted it to have. So I did it in front of our legal assistants that morning when I wasn't in there to prepare for jury instructions. That's what I was doing. And my assistant cried, and I was like, that's it.
There we
got
go.
it. So that's where we kept it.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. One time. Well, was you nervous?
I was nervous sitting at the table. But once I actually got up there and started talking to them, that's kind of how I've always been doing presentations, is once I get up there and I start connecting with people, then I feel okay.
Yeah.
So.
Did the cameras get to y'all? Which I don't know. Was that the first time you've been like nationally televised?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Tom, have you ever been on a national television? Never? Really?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, y'all did good. You couldn't really tell it. You were, you just got up here and you was like, ma'am, you ever heard of the 10 Commandments? Okay.
I get a little feisty.
Yeah.
I can't help it.
I mean, listen, I felt that. Everyone that was watching felt that.
Yeah.
So that's what the professionalism y'all showed. And Judge Kirk was just like so professional. I mean, he'd just be like, oh, that's overruled. Oh, that's sustained. All right, and guess what? I'm bringing you chicken biscuits in the morning. It's going to be good. We got strawberry donuts on the way. It was just everyone instantly fell in love with him. But then at the end, when he read off the verdict, it just showed you like, that's a professional, someone who can make people comfortable in this stressful environment. And then when the time comes to lay down the law, he does it. And he's, best in the business. And now he has, did you know he was on Barnwood Builders, that show?
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw it.
I need to watch it.
I think he's on 2 episodes.
Really?
I believe so.
I have to check
And that's
it
a
out.
local guy too. Isn't that Barnwood's from like Lewisburg?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big show.
Yeah,
Greenbrier County.
Yeah, I think they're from Lewisburg.
Doesn't he have that home in like the middle of that island in Hinton or something? I can't remember. Anyway, don't look for it, y'all.
Yeah.
Just psycho.
Right.
But anyway, all right. So I think before we get into the day-to-day specifics, can we talk about the evidence that wasn't submitted? Because a lot of people don't realize how much you didn't bring up in court. Is there anything specific that you all really wanted to get in there and maybe you forgot about, or you kind of
Cancer.
right? Yeah. I know the jury mentioned text messages being a real big deal of showing the argument the day before. Was that presented? I can't remember hearing that. It was over a utility bill.
We didn't present that on
We
the
did
screen, but the jury received it because it was contextual.
Sure.
Because that was one of our main things, is that, we're putting certain things up on the screen, but when it goes back to the jury, they need to have context for what they saw.
That makes sense.
So
Okay.
Did you kind of like, where you only had such a short amount of time, did you have to say like, okay, we're going to do this and this. We're not doing all of this. We're going to focus on this. Is that kind of how it works?
That's exactly how it worked. Yeah. And that was part of the when Ashley and I got the case, we started focusing on here's what we need to prove this. And we didn't look at it as a murder case. It was strictly a circumstantial case. The crime was irrelevant in terms of trial prep and analysis. It could have been a drug case. It could have been a burglary. It could have been anything if you only have circumstantial case. And that's all we had.
Right. Well, let's talk about that too. So to me, with a broken pancreas, I think that it was more than circumstantial evidence seeing the blood work of his sugar being 21. Is there a certain way that these things are clarified? Like, yeah, that's circumstantial. And then what's the other one called? Like what's direct. Okay. Do you kind of label these things beforehand? Is everyone agreed? Like that's circumstantial. We agree. Or is it just your perceived, thought about what the evidence is?
And that's a fair question. Direct evidence is somebody says, I saw you do this. I saw you do that. The ME removes a spent round from a dead body. The people in the lab analyze it and say it came from this gun. That's all direct evidence, and we had nothing like that. So even though there was a blood glucose reading in and of itself, that wasn't direct evidence of anything. It was just a medical fact. Where the circumstances came through is how did that number come to pass?
Gotcha. So direct evidence is like, I saw you shoot that person.
Correct.
Yes.
Circumstantial is, well, we found the gun in the dumpster, behind that alley and it had your fingerprints on it, or is that direct?
The fingerprints would be direct evidence.
Gotcha.
But the fact that you found a gun with fingerprints, if you can tie that together with something else, that might be direct evidence or it might be circumstantial.
Gotcha.
It's all going to be in the context of what else is being discussed at the time.
Sure. Well, and it was the mountains of circumstantial evidence, but also the motive too, which one thing that kind of, and jump in anytime, Jozy, but one thing that kind of drove me nuts was the constant objection saying, we are not, discussing the financial crime. And I'm like, right. But that's the motive that's why we're here. When did you all decide that was going to be like, was it pretty evident after the Ponzi scheme, like looking up the details of that like, oh yeah. And then seeing the text of Michael, saying, well, how are we broke? Why do we have no money? And this ain't verbatim, but that's pretty much what it was. There was a bunch of evidence like that. Did those text messages lead y'all to say, oh yeah, he found out about the Ponzi scheme?
Well,
and that's what happened.
Fairly early on. Well, he never did find out about the Ponzi scheme.
Well,
really.
Right.
Fairly early on, it was apparent that there was a critical date of the 6th to go from Beckley down to Virginia and meet with the banker. That was just, it was too coincidental. There had to be a connection, and there sure was.
Sure. So, well, and, we don't know for a fact he knew what the scheme was, but we knew that he saw things starting to unravel. Mm-hmm. Like he saw money start to not be there. He saw utility bills that were getting ready to be canceled, things like that. So, yeah, I guess you don't have definitive proof of like, him texting, Natalie, I can't believe you did a Ponzi scheme. This is crazy,
But kind of like to that point where like they're objecting to ever bringing up the Ponzi scheme. It was, I don't know if like how you guys felt, but like it was frustrating for me having covered it and knowing that like you'd had a hearing with Bledsoe, you'd questioned him, and a judge had decided like you get to bring up the Ponzi scheme, like you get to bring up her charges. So like what do you think their, I guess, strategy was in continuing to object? The judge always, overruled it, and he'd already decided that you could bring it up.
Just planting doubt?
I'm really not sure because I think bringing up the Ponzi scheme and talking about it makes her look bad. It does. That's just plain and simple. And every time we used it, the intention was either to show I mean, it was always to show that it was her reason for killing Michael, and that's the only purpose that we were allowed to use it for.
Right.
So I don't know if they believed that we were going outside of that scope, or if it was just, you were this woman's already down and you are kicking her, but she did it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's the pound the table thing of like, okay, well, they had these trigger words. Every time I hear this, I'm going to say object. I don't even care what it's about, and they just kept on. And I think, do you think in rural West Virginia that plays differently than in like a bigger city? Maybe that would work in a different area, because I just felt like in Raleigh County, people are going to see right through this stuff. You're not letting people talk. You're objecting when a mom is trying to put her pictures up during the mercy phase. There's a lot of stuff that I just think didn't translate well to rural West Virginians. Do you think there's a difference there, or is it kind of the same in most courtrooms?
Well, Ashley's a former PD, so maybe this is better directed to her. But from my perspective, they were just covering a record. They just wanted objections to all of this stuff so that on appeal, especially later in the trial when things were not going well for the defense, I just think that's what defense attorneys do.
Right.
And that's part of their job.
Do you think it hurt him more with Natalie not testifying or not providing a theory as to what happened? Like the awesome part where you took 5 minutes to open the projector up to show this number 0. I was like, yes, this is great. But it was basically saying 0 theories as to how Michael Cochran died. What do you think hurt them the most?
I think the defendant hurt herself the most. She left so many trails, electronic pieces of evidence. And there was a Friday where the defense couldn't get their witnesses there. And that extra day that weekend, just the text messages between Michael and Natalie were 1,600 pages. It takes a while to get through those again. And in preparation for what we thought would be her testimony, that extra day was a huge plus. Now, we didn't get to use it directly, but we kind of substituted Bob Heinzman as a rebuttal witness. When she didn't testify, we were able to take some of those pieces that we got ready for her and get the same evidence in through him.
Right. And what was the main purpose of Heinzman's rebuttal? Because I thought you all were going to call someone that directly showed people that Michael was actually an attentive father. Like I thought maybe you were, but I like how you all let the kids speak, because I think if you like, they're the people that have been hurt the most out of all this. And I think if you don't allow them to speak their truth, however, they arrived at it, that wouldn't have played well. Like, I think the jury knew, like, they felt the pain for these kids regardless of what they said. I feel like if you it would be looked at as attacking them in a way.
And we did too. We talked about that ahead of time. And there was an old Beckley lawyer who died last year who was absolutely fabulous at cross-examination. The problem was he cross-examined rapists and nuns exactly the same. And that's, with those kids, you're absolutely right. They appeared to be coached to me. Picking up on the word agitated, both of them, that got my attention. But you don't want to beat up on those people. They've had a horrible, horrible last 5 or 6 years. And they were, the son was really small when this happened. And his testimony really wasn't all that believable. What kid that age knows about his parents' business to the extent that he testified to? Why beat him up on that?
Sure.
Just do something else. And Heinzman was just something else with his mom's own words.
Yeah.
That just absolutely debunked all of that.
I love Heinzman. If he's listening, one of my favorite parts was when Victor was trying to have this Perry Mason moment and he was like, show me in here that Michael didn't know about the financial. He's like, there's like 1,000 pages. You want me to look? And he's like, yeah, go ahead and look. And he's like, Judge, you want me to look? He's like, yeah, go ahead. And he's like, all right. And then he was like, okay, this one, this one, this one, this. And, I just was like, oh my goodness, this was the wrong dude.
It was
to ask that too.
I wanted to ask about that because he had done the same thing to Bledsoe, like your last witness. And obviously Bledsoe wasn't handed like any documents. So he can't show. He's like, I can't show you.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, did you guys think about that when like Heinzman was coming back up, that like Matthew's probably going to do the same thing and like, let's have something available? Or like, how did that play out, knowing that with Bledsoe, he wasn't able to point to anything because he didn't have the documents?
I mean, that's just like a defense strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that we really talked about or anticipated happening again. And I, don't get me wrong, I love Matthew. I think he's a great guy. But I just thought that was silly to do that.
That's nice
knowing
of you.
He didn't have it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He knows.
So,
and he could have given it to him, right? Because at that point, I think probably a lot of his reports were in test, or they were in evidence. So he could have handed him something.
He didn't actually want him to produce anything. He just wanted to make him look not credible. And I think that failed pretty miserably, honestly.
It failed cataclysmically. Bob Heinzman just was such a good
I think he wanted to object, like, objection, he's making this up, like, or just, try to get him to stop talking, because he just kept on, it was great.
Well, it's interesting because right before that, you have, these delays. Stanley's like, I need a copy of everything. And then like Heinzman's like, well, can I have a minute to, and they're like, okay, hurry up. But like, yeah. So that was the balance of like some delays, and then,
And that's great of you to say, like, you all still remained. Here's the thing. I get so emotional. I couldn't do this job that y'all do, because I'd be like standing up like, what'd you say? Like, and that's not how it works. Like, people probably don't know. I mean, I'm sure a lot do that work in the courtroom. They know how professional you are behind the scenes. But can you talk about that? Like, how did you all react to each other behind when the cameras were off and you were done for the day? Like, were you cordial? Were they cordial?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Matthew Victor has a great story. He truly does. If you can talk him into coming down to your basement, you need to talk to him and make him tell you the whole story. He grew up 15 miles from Auschwitz. And,
wow.
Yeah. Didn't come to the U.S. till he was 24. And he was a PhD candidate in music. I mean, this guy has a story to tell.
In music?
Yeah.
What does he play? Imagine, like the oboe?
I don't know. Can you probably everything. Can you imagine any of us going to Krakow, learning another language, learning another system? It's inconceivable.
I mean, I couldn't do it. I can't go to Charlotte without having a nervous breakdown.
Right.
So, much less move there.
Either.
Yeah. I'm like, I love, Raleigh County is my place. I love these hills. It's like a warm hug when I come home. If I go to California or something, I come back home and like, it's literally like the state is hugging me. I just love it so much. So yeah, I'm never leaving.
But back to your question, this was, even though it might not have appeared to be, it was a very professionally put on trial on both sides. Tactics, approach, style notwithstanding, it was professionally done. And there was never any animosity from the state and the defense.
That's great. That's great because, I was a little hard on them. Now, if Victor and Selden, I want them as a pair. I can't do individuals. They both got to come. Me and Jozy want to interview them. I would love to talk to them because people can disagree. Like, we forget. You can disagree with people and you can do it professionally. And that's why I'm not a lawyer, because I would be disbarred within like a year, I'd say, but fingergate aside. But I'd say he's not used to cameras like this either. I'd say they haven't had a lot of.
The cameras really didn't. I don't think either one of us ever.
Because they were all behind you.
Yeah.
Well, they just didn't enter into the picture except where you had to adjust for the juvenile's testimony and stuff like that. It was just a non-issue.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, so obviously a lot of people have their thoughts about Matthew and Stanley defending Natalie. They were appointed, and people just don't understand like the job that they were required to do. You know, I think they take it as, oh, well, you're defending her, so you must believe everything, or, you know. So can you just like speak a little bit to that of like, what is the job of a defense attorney, especially when they're appointed by the state? You know, what kind of obligation do they have to their client, regardless of what the charge is?
Well, I haven't been in that position exactly, but I have been a defense attorney and I've done appointed work, and it is hard. It gives you a greater appreciation for the fact that criminal defendants are people too. It very much humanizes the system, which I'm very appreciative for now being a prosecutor. But when you're a defense attorney, you don't get to when you're an appointed defense attorney, you don't get to pick and choose who you're going to defend. You might get appointed, you know, a child molester or an animal abuser or a murderer, and even if you don't wholeheartedly believe what they tell you, your job is to be a zealous advocate and to represent them the best way you can. And when I was a defense attorney, I always told people my job is to make the state do their job. So I think that's exactly what they were trying to do.
That's a good point and great question, Jozy, because I think the reason people get so upset and emotional like me is they tend to say, oh, you're on the murderer's side. But in reality, one reason why we're, you know, the greatest country on earth is everyone is entitled to a defense. But also, is there any time, as you know, with your defense experience, where you had to kind of step aside morally, or do you try to find a moral and ethical collaboration to where, like, yes, I feel okay with presenting this defense because it's the truth? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It is a very heavy job on both sides. A lot of the time, you have to set your personal boundaries aside for that. And the way that I made myself okay with a lot of the things that I personally had to defend was, again, they're entitled to have that defense, and they need someone to make the state prove that they did this beyond reasonable doubt, because if you can't prove that, then this person is legally innocent.
Burden of proof.
Yes.
How does that decision, like, so in this case, who appointed Matthew?
That is usually done by the chief circuit judge of the county. And then, so Matthew was initially appointed.
Right.
And then this case was so voluminous and so large that he needed co-counsel. And so then they also appointed Stanley later on.
Can they say no? Like, if you're a defense attorney, and I know that you're in a pool of people that can get selected or something like that, can they say, no, I don't want to do this case if they're appointed? Or
Tom's been around this longer than I have, so he would be better for that.
They can.
Okay.
Sometimes. You're on a list, which means you're assigned cases, you take the case, but there are circumstances where a judge would say, okay, you can sit this one out.
And Victor's been on it a while, right? And he been on it
from the very beginning.
Yeah.
He had a different co-counsel, if I remember, initially, and then Stanley came in when the case was re-indicted.
Yeah. And people didn't realize that they were state appointed. Like, they're like, how does she afford these lawyers? I mean, to their credit, like, they gave it heck all the way to the end.
They did.
You know, they kept going even to, you know, after the mercy ruling, they were still like, okay, well, here's, you know, we're going to have this meeting. We're going to do this. We're going to, you know. So
could I say one other thing about this? And I cannot absolutely say this is true, but just from my observations of interaction with the defense, this defendant was so smart and so commanding and demanding. She really ran this defense. She was the one that's telling them, ask this, writing notes, telling them what to do. It put them in a very tough spot, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it was pretty apparent to me, and I'm glad you know, because she would be like, oh, no, he didn't do that. He done this. You know, it'd
you
be
could hear
whispering
her-
certain
yeah,
things.
watching
And then they
that.
would get up and say some things that just made no sense.
Correct.
And you're just like, what? And you're kind of just witnessing a conduit of insanity. I mean, in a way, that's just kind of what it seemed to be. So I'm glad you brought that up, because in a way, like, what are they going to do? Be like, no, Natalie, stop telling me what to do. You know, I mean, I guess they could, but
Yeah, people were asking that, like, how she could pass them questions, and like, it's like, well, it's her case. Like, she wants to.
and yeah, oh yeah, that's a good question. So her walking up
Oh,
to
that was
the
another one
judge,
too.
everyone was wondering why that was allowed.
They have to.
Yeah.
In West Virginia, the defendants have to be present at bench conferences because, and that makes sense. It's very interesting. In Indiana, they don't, but the state is pushing for that because they want the jury to see the defendant paraded back and forth up there. But in our case, it's to really protect the record so that the defendant is involved in all aspects. And at the end of the day, it's her life on the line. So she ought to be involved. Any defendant should be involved. So I like the way we do that here and make sure that the defendant is involved in all of these decisions one way or the other.
That makes sense. So it's a per state thing? Like each
Yes.
state kind of
Yes.
decides? Okay.
That's
that's
not
good.
the same everywhere.
Well, and a lot of people were, I think things like Court TV and Law and Crime showing these trials is really good for people. I think it's good for people to learn the process. I think it's bad for the defendant, to be honest, because I'm glad they did, because there's a lot of people that got hurt by Natalie. But my goodness, when all this stuff started being aired, and I really feel for her family that was there for her, because they have their own opinion, and, you know, everyone has the right to their own opinion. But seeing the mountain of evidence poured onto this, I think is going to make their life so hard. But I am glad that they showed the process. For one, we all need to know the people who got hurt need the ability to show the truth. A lot of people, like the Hamiltons, they had to wait 6 years. They couldn't say anything. And they would see Donna in a store and she, you know, go off on them. And they're like, they know they can't say anything because you could screw up the case. They had to wait 6 years to say anything. So I think in that instance, yeah, they're owed to that. But you know, in some cases it could be bad because the community would already have their judgments decided. And then what if someone gets railroaded or there's something that's fishy that goes on? That's not like this case. But anyway, I think people learned a lot.
Yeah.
So
I would, so like, kind of like going back to like the witnesses, obviously, you know, you had Bledsoe and Heinzman who were probably there from day one for you guys to like talk to. How did you guys go about, I guess, talking to the witnesses that you were going to end up calling to the stand? Like, did you interview them much? Did you go off of what had they'd previously told the former prosecutor? How did that work in kind of like your preparation for the trial, knowing that you had such a short time to do it?
So a lot of the witnesses that we used had already given statements to law enforcement. So
Okay.
we did have the benefit of reviewing those. And then we would also call them in and talk with them. And that was helpful because we could see if anything had changed over time, if we were going to have any issues that we didn't foresee. So they did all come in and kind of give us their story. And we were just very clear with them the whole time. Tell the truth. Whatever the truth is, go in there and tell the truth. And they did.
it's easy when you do that, right? It's like, hey, you know, all we got to do is tell the truth. This is easy.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. I don't have to remember the 5 things I
Mhm.
said on why Michael ended up in the floor. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember
Um,
Stephanie saying that, like, I just told the truth.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, that's what Stephanie said. And she said, I have every receipt
Ever.
since kindergarten. And I was like, thank goodness. And shout out, people need to realize that John and Stephanie Hamilton, Chris and Jennifer Davis, if they don't let truth lead the way, this doesn't happen.
Right.
Correct.
It wouldn't have happened.
No.
And them coming through and saying, hey, wait a minute. You know, Jennifer thinking like, I put insulin in that bag that day. You know, if it wasn't for people coming to these recollection. And imagine like your best friend, you realize that she murdered your other best friend. And you're like, you know, I try to put myself in their position of like, whoa, it's just, I'm proud to know them now because I've gotten to talk to them on the phone and everything, but it's just so the courage it took for them to, and then this small community, you know, their names were dragged through the mud. Everyone like, why was there 8, 9 people there? Why didn't they call the, you know? And then finally, now that they're able to tell their story, it makes total sense. Like they were manipulated. This was, I call it a cult. It was a cult, but it wasn't a cult, if that makes sense. Like they were in this world that Natalie has built.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, you want to get into the specific days?
Sure, yeah.
All right, so we got day 1.
Well, I think I had a little bit of because that's not day 1. That's day 3. The jury selection was day 1.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you kind of have to talk about that because obviously I got to see some of the questioning that you guys did. That's when you guys presented that our case is all circumstantial, which I thought that was a really bold move to come out and tell the jury that. So I wanted to ask just like, what was the decision behind wanting that to be like one of the first things you told the jury? And then just how that process was like of trying to narrow down who you wanted to be on the jury.
Well, in your interview with the juror, something came up, and this needs to be clarified. The defense gets, by rule, 6 peremptory strikes. The state gets 2.
What's a peremptory strike?
You just, for no reason, we don't like the color of your hair, you're gone.
Gotcha.
And
you write that down like color of hair sucks.
We don't want it.
All right. Gotcha.
Which Ashley's got a story about hair. She'll tell you later.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
But it's 6 and 2, so it's not even. The defendant gets to get rid of 6 potential jurors, and we get 2.
Which I'm kind of down for that.
And that's fine. That's the rule that you got to live by it. But your juror thought it was even, and it's not.
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that.
Catch that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. Which I wouldn't have known.
And who would know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, you're getting picked to be on. You're learning like, oh, I may be on the biggest trial to ever be in Raleigh County, maybe in West Virginia, arguably. I think this is just going to explode into pure insanity, even though it already has. But so thanks for clarifying that. Do you have a tactic of like who you were looking for? Were you wanting to keep health professionals? Were you wanting to keep, you know, did you ask anyone if their pancreas worked? Or, you know, was there any kind of tactics there?
We expected the defense to ask that question, and they never did.
Really?
Of each individual juror. But when it comes to jury selection, this is your interviewee. She loves jury selection.
Nice.
I'm the only trial lawyer on the planet probably that enjoys jury selection. Because I'm really not a people person. I'm very introverted. I don't spend a lot of time around a whole lot of people. But this is an opportunity to get to know like what makes people tick, to get to know some very intimate facets of their lives without actually like having to sit down and make small talk and everything else. You can get straight into it. And I think that's very interesting. As far as our questions for jury selection, I mean, we were pretty broad with them intentionally because the state just wants people. We want, you know, people who live and work in this community.
Parents.
Happy to have parents. We weren't looking for any specific type of person when we went in there. You know, we had questions that were designed to filter out people who we thought would be biased one way or another, for sure. So I know, I remember when you'd posted on Facebook initially, somebody asked why they weren't picked.
Oh yeah,
and
I should bring that up.
And a lot of people, the reason that they weren't chosen would be because they said that they would show bias towards if someone in uniform testified, if law enforcement testified, they said, oh, we would give that more weight than we would give to a civilian. We can't have that. You know, that might be great for the state, but that's not fair. And the idea is to get a fair and impartial panel. So people who, you know, answered like that, were gone, people who were way too familiar already with the case. Because the idea is that you start fresh. And that was hard to do with this jury. I mean, I thought it would take us several days to pick this jury. From the beginning, Tom said 2 days, and he was right. So,
well, the OJ trial took like 2 months.
Yeah.
So, that was like a year. So y'all did really good.
Yeah. Do you think that like the time between when the murder happened to when it actually went to trial helped? Because that was my theory, that like, because it took so long to go to trial, that like most people forgot or only remembered like the barest details. Like, was that like the case? Or
we did hear that a lot.
Mhm.
A lot of people said, in hindsight, I remember like maybe hearing something about this when it initially happened, or I remember hearing about the Ponzi scheme when she was initially convicted,
Mhm.
or something.
Anyone go
that.
like, yeah, she took 20 grand from me. Mhm.
Yeah.
But that was, we did hear a whole lot of that, and I think that did help, because if this had been fresh and this had been tried in 2019, I think it would have been very hard to get a jury here. But we were good. We I think got very impartial people, and we're very careful about that.
Yeah.
We were.
I think so too. And especially after the interview, just sounded like that they really worked together and just let the facts decide. Cause I was, saying like, I was so emotional. So like, well, we were just listening to the facts. It would be the little things would be like, why is he doing that? But she just really acted impartial, just to anything but the facts.
It was a very engaged jury. There were a few that just seemed to be there, but for the most part, they were focused. They were paying attention, and you could just watch them. And that they were an impressive jury. They really were.
I don't know how they didn't pass out at about 2:30 every day from all the donuts. Like, But
do you think it was intentional? Because obviously you guys got 2 strikes. The defense got 6. Do you think it was intentional on their part that they picked a very female-heavy jury?
I don't know. It kind of seemed like our pool was very female-heavy.
Really?
It did.
So I don't know if that was intentional. It feels like it was just coincidental to me, because we didn't even realize it until after the fact. We went back and counted, and we were like, oh, it's majority female jury.
Which that could go either way. It could go with having sympathy for her kids, or it could go, which I think it ultimately did, having sympathy for Donna.
Yes.
Which there were a few moments that was like, okay, well, let's just, that nailed the coffin. We're done. And one was Donna's, which we'll get to later, but Donna's victim statement that she didn't get to read in full. But yeah, it was just so powerful. I think I'd say there's a lot of people crying. Did you notice emotion around you, not just from the jury, but what was the feeling in the court on that mercy day specifically?
The mercy phase is unlike anything else. We've several times when we talked about it, we've heard it referred to as the Wild Wild West, and it really is. So you kind of go in there not really knowing what to expect or what everybody's going to be feeling. We're really zeroed in on what's going on, and yes, it's very emotional. It's easy to get detached from that, but I think, we're lawyers, and we're separated from everything, but we're still human. So I definitely, I felt heaviness for Natalie's family, and for Michael's family, and for all these people that are getting up there, and they're just, something you don't see often in court is people getting their opportunity to just lay their heart out there. And seeing that happen in a courtroom, knowing it's happening on an international stage, it is unlike anything else.
Yeah.
So you can definitely feel the heaviness in the room. It's very tense. But it's also coming at the end of a murder trial. It's so draining. Like, you can feel everyone has lost their energy at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what we said. We ran out of energy at the same time we ran out of trial.
Yeah. Well, and the juror mentioned was like, I know me personally, I found myself feeling sorry for Natalie. I'll just say it. I started feeling sorry for her in a way of that she is so lost and twisted, and I felt like her representation wasn't the best. I don't know. And then I was like, wait a minute. That's how we got into this whole thing. And I think that she played to certain emotions just like that. And the real Natalie you would see is when Donna would get up there and speak her truth. And then Natalie would be like, you know, she just would have this look on her of like, she couldn't fathom that Donna was even saying what she was saying right now. And I'm just thinking of the type of person to say like, Michael didn't even love his family. You know, they only came around on the holidays. First off, that's the majority of families. Yeah. Majority of families go to Easter, you know, they go to church on Easter and Christmas, and they'll, you know, visit. Now, some families are a lot closer, but and typically the family gravitates toward the female side. In most families, at least in my experience, it's not that the male doesn't love their family. It's just that usually females are more attentive, and they're more, you know, and they're more demanding too of like, no, we're going to go here. We're going to go do, and that's not saying anything. That's just typically
Wait a second.
my experience. But anyway, I just really, it was just so many emotions. And hearing the juror say, was it the juror that said barbaric? She say it was kind of barbaric.
I remember that was her. I know
she said she was going thinking mercy that morning.
Yeah, she did say that.
She was like, well, if they get up there and say she did it, I'm thinking mercy. And they did the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm. Did it stick out to you like that Natalie's family? Because obviously when the case is going on, like certain people can't be in the courtroom because they're going to be testifying and things like that. But at the end, anyone could have been there. Did it stick out to you that Natalie's family was very notably absent when you guys brought up witnesses for the mercy phase?
We noticed. We definitely, you know, it was apparent because, you know, the state side of the courtroom is packed full,
right? And
the defense side at that point is media only. I was surprised by that for sure. I definitely, even if they weren't sticking around to hear what the state's witnesses had to say, I thought they would stick around to see what the verdict was at least, and they didn't come back for that either. So I don't know. I'm still kind of bewildered by it. I don't know.
Do we know if Natalie told him to leave?
I don't know.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
She didn't want those people hearing any of this stuff.
I mean, you almost got to go like this, la 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 la, like
right.
You know,
but they can all see it if they want. I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's
online
the thing.
now.
And that's how I'm trying to approach these interviews of like, I want to have empathy for this family for when they're willing to listen. You know, I'm not going to trash them for loving their daughter and this and that. Now, granted, the shade towards Michael was getting to me. I think there was a lot of shade thrown towards him. And literally, you know, one got up there and said that, you know, Natalie didn't do anything and kind of implied that Michael did this after watching War Dogs, you know. And I'm like, there's no way Daphne watched War Dogs, first off. That was the first building of my theory. I'm like, War Dogs probably started it. And later we found out the 2020 episode with Tony McCall, she mentioned that she was going to show it as an onboarding video. I was like, yep, that's where it came from. And if you watch that movie, there's so many parallels. Have you watched it?
I haven't watched it yet. we're saving it to watch.
Oh, there you go.
So
yeah, we should
when
have
this kind of dies down.
We should have had a viewing party.
Gosh.
Wait till you watch it. The parallels, oh my goodness. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's kind of, is there any other besides jury selection? Like you want to go into the first day?
I think, yeah, well, jury selection, I think that you covered it. Again, most of it is behind closed doors. We don't see it until it comes out and they announce the names and then we get ready for the trial.
Yep. Jozy asked a question early on and we never answered it. And that is, why did we go into the circumstantial evidence aspect of it so early? Part of that is just to counter the media or the movies, the TV, because these people always expect DNA. The DNA results come back in like 6 minutes, and fingerprints, videos. We had none of that. we were never going to have any of that. And the jury was never going to hear any of that for that reason. So I think you have to prep them that this is not the kind of case you're seeing on TV, even though a lot of the things look like what you see on TV. When it comes to evidence, that was not going to be one of them.
Yeah. If you would have had a C-peptide test when he was in ICU, would you have charged her as a prosecutor in 2019?
I don't think I knew enough. I mean, maybe having gone through this and learned a lot of things that I didn't know before, perchance, but you'd still have to put together the pieces of the puzzle. And this was a huge file. It's like 70,000 pages.
Right.
And until you go through and sift out the text messages and put them in context with other text messages that are going back and forth, I don't know that would have been enough right then and there, because you still had a whole lot to learn.
Sure, I got you. Well, basically, and this is good to know because we're trying to get legislation introduced where it requires a C-peptide test. We're going to call it the Michael Brandon Cochran Law. Hopefully it'll get introduced. We'll see. But basically C-peptide, and I learned about this during this trial too, because I started researching insulin murders, and every one I found, there's 5 or 6 that I read that is totally consistent. It's always brain damage. It's always the length of time between when the insulin's given to when they die. And they come back and you confuse brain damage for recovery. He came back in the hospital, and then Donna was informed he was going to hospice, and she's like, well, he woke up, stuff like that. So it's very eerie, but C-peptide would basically say the levels of insulin was, inflated. Mm-hmm. And I think she gave him 50 units is just my guess, but I think it would have been the smoking gun, but I don't know. I'm not a prosecutor.
Yeah, I don't know if that was enough. That might give you a cause of death, but you still have to tie it in with how did that insulin get there and who did it.
So then you tie in the bottle and
there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. That would have been helpful, but I don't know that would have been definitive.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, helpful's good. Because I think, and there's a lot of weird stuff, like things weren't really brought up about the quick burial and all this in the trial, but there was a lot of weird things of people not getting invited to the funeral, but you can't even really, I don't even know if that's considered evidence, really. It's
just a statement of what happened. I don't know that it was probative of anything.
Right.
Now, the other, if you're a Kurt Vonnegut fan, the other grand falloon that they launched was she should have had him cremated and she didn't, so that must mean she's innocent. That was meaningless. Totally, if not completely meaningless, 99% meaningless. Because what you would be looking for in an autopsy, since he'd already had treatment for his low blood sugar, would be puncture wounds. What was the ME's? Why would you be doing that? Unless, now, if the Cochran Law becomes, and that insulin was the causation for what ultimately led to death, then maybe you can say, hey, an autopsy right then and there, we're looking for it, and you can find it, and that might be helpful. But had he been cremated, what did we get out of the 2 autopsy, other than the fact that you don't know unless you look?
Right. Well, the second exhumation literally gave nothing, right?
Except that it was done by Dr. Uribe, and we could not have won this case without him, I don't think.
Uribe and Krieger.
Yes, and Ben Hatfield needs some credit for that because he was the one that found them. Both of those were key witnesses for the federal government in the VA execution cases where the nurse was killing those veterans with insulin. Mm-hmm. And both of them were involved in that case. And I got to say, our experts were so far beyond what the defense offered in expert testimony. It was not even close.
Gotcha. And that brings up some more questions. It's important to note that Ben later had to resign because of some allegations that popped up.
Several workplace misconduct allegations, which is why he got those witnesses, but then you guys had to end up taking the case.
Yeah. And can you explain, there was an issue with files.
Oh, yeah.
Can you
There wasn't.
explain what that was?
And all along, the defense kept saying pretty much what defendants always say. We're not getting enough discovery, not getting enough. It becomes white noise after a while. But thanks to Ashley and the defense investigator, Cook, you were able to graphically see the difference on the external hard drives between what we had and what we had given them. And it was a significant amount of information in terms of quantity of it. Whether it was significant in terms of what was utilized, that's a different story altogether. But in fairness to the defense, they did not have everything until October when we gave it to them.
Gotcha. So why were the files not transferred ahead of time?
Okay. And I'm not the computer guy to explain this, but the Reader's Digest version of what happened will kind of explain it. We had a file on an external hard drive that we utilized. The person that did the transfer to another external hard drive to give to the defense was very concerned about corrupting that file. So she downloaded it onto what's called a P drive. I couldn't tell you what that is, but that's what she did, and then downloaded it to a blank external hard drive. And some of it didn't transfer. Why it didn't transfer, I couldn't begin to tell you. But what appeared to her to be the whole file, because her machine said it's all downloaded, and it took 4.5 hours.
Took a long time.
Took 4.5 or 5 hours to download this file onto the external hard drive. It just didn't all transfer for whatever reason.
Gotcha. That's good to know, because, typically we make mountains out of anthills around here. So early on, we were unsure. A lot of people were kind of leading to believe like, oh, I bet they meant to not give all the files. But ultimately, it was a hard drive issue you mentioned, honest mistake, and the defense didn't really raise a concern over it.
Well, they raised a lot of concerns over it, but they got everything because by the end, Ashley was able to, and just seeing it on a computer screen was eye-opening. Now, why our office didn't do that early on, I can't explain. But at the end of the day, they had everything we had.
Gotcha.
And they had really from October to January for that sliver of information. And it was a fair amount of files that didn't transfer. What they were and specifically whether they were utilized or not, I can't say. But they had it for enough time that they were able to go to trial with it.
Well, and to be fair, y'all haven't saw a file until September either.
Oh, no.
Right.
Yeah. They had this case for 4 years. We had it for 4 months.
Yeah. So it's kind of fair ground to me, really. And like you mentioned,
But again, not purposefully done.
Sure,
Not at all.
not purposely done.
Yeah.
And the state's obligated to turn this over. So it was something that was on us. We needed to do that.
That's in discovery. Is
Yes.
that what it's called?
Right.
Okay. What's discovery for people who don't know in a case?
It's basically just the state provides you information. Here's what we have. It's going to prove our case, and we're giving it to you.
And if you don't show everything, they could go for a mistrial.
They could overturn it on appeal. Yeah, that's it. And also the state's obligated to turn over evidence that shows the defendant's innocent, or it might not even not rising to the level of innocence, but it could be in their favor. And so we gave them and meant to give them and would always give them everything we've got. It was just a logistical problem.
And did no one see one file before September but Ben Hatfield?
I mean, his assistant, Susan, who worked with us on this trial, she would have seen it,
Okay.
but no other attorneys in our office worked on it.
Gotcha.
It was not kept in our central file system that we use because it's, again, so large. It was all kept on external hard drives, which we did not have access to.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, bravo, y'all, because is quite the feat to pull off. It's all right. So we're getting into, how did you decide the order of witnesses you were going to call?
we just basically sat down and to prep a case. And some of us have been doing this the same way, and it may not be the most efficient way, but it's so fundamental. What do we have to prove to prevail? And so there's a page of a type page. It says the elements that we have to prove to win the case.
The burden of proof.
The burden
PDF.
the burden of proof, but it's the same thing as you'll find in a jury instruction.
Right.
Premeditated.
Oh, so specifically for the murder.
Malice
the different.
and all that. And then we just went through with the witness list by that time was fairly pared down. It says, who do we need to prove 1? Who do we need to prove 2? And then that really formed the basis for our witness list. And then we came up with an order of proof, which is what's the logical way to lay this out? And then we just divided up the witnesses. It doesn't always work perfectly because not everybody's available when you would like to have them. But it in this case, all things considered, it worked out pretty well. The guy that was going to do the charter, Kearns, he had another charter on the day that we wanted him. So we just had to kind of fit him in a little bit later than we wanted. But we weren't going to mess this guy up when we could take him at another time.
The bank guy?
No, the bank guy.
No,
the pilot.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Which he didn't take too long.
No,
it was
he didn't. But he had just come back from being up in Wisconsin on another charter. So.
You talk about someone on some Mexican supplements. That pilot's had spent a few days in the gym. And of course, we know you're not on Mexican supplements. And by the way, that's freaking ridiculous. Yeah. But I've been trying to educate people on steroid use, which I don't use steroids, but they get a bad name. I don't care. Y'all can get mad at me. And also, steroids were never found, correct? Nothing. Only the estrogen.
The steroid that Natalie had picked up on the 5th.
Yes.
But not for that.
Not for like
before that.
How do they
Jacked.
classify that?
It's a corticosteroid.
Right. Yeah,
Corticos,
not very muscle
right.
mass.
But that came with a needle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that gave her the means to, we don't know how she went about this, but it did provide cover because to use the bottle that was unused, she would have had to be able to inject it.
Oh, I know, Tom. I'll go ahead and take that one. I know how she. No, I'm just kidding. I have a really good theory, though. But anyway, okay. So, I had one question that was really, really good before we get into these witnesses, and I'm sorry, but I cannot remember what it was. All right. So, first witness was Trooper Robert Heinzman. How did you all feel after your opening statements? How did you feel your opening statement went? Like,
It just laid out our case. Here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Who did the opening? I couldn't even remember.
That would be me.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been so long.
Yeah. It feels like
forever
light years ago.
I remember Tom. But Jozy mentioned that it felt like Victor was kind of rambling a little bit in the opening.
I felt he was nervous personally because of the cameras, and I just felt the rambling. Obviously, the rambling was the strategy, but it did seem like you were very clear in like, he woke up this day, he was finding out, he was, it was like you did a somewhat, not a PowerPoint timeline, but you had a timeline as well. And whereas Victor was very much like steroids and this, like it just felt all over the place. I don't know if that was your...
I think that set the tone for how each side was going to go about presenting the case. And ours was just laid out. Here are the circumstantial facts that prove that she did the crime, and the defense was trying to scatter anything and everything they could because the defense only has to confuse one juror.
Right.
We got to get all 12 of them to agree.
Yeah, that's something too, because if you don't get all 12, eventually, if they hold out, it's a hung jury. Which what happens in that case? Would they
You
just
do it
declare,
all over again.
Have to do it all over
It's
again?
a mistrial.
Do they have can Judge Kirkpatrick be like, no, I will not give you one biscuit until you decide unanimously guilty or not? Or is he kind of like,
It's called an Allen charge, and they caution the judges not to give those except under extreme circumstances. But basically it says, look, everybody's invested a lot in this. Why don't you go back and talk about it a little more and see if you can work this out?
Gotcha. I remember my question. Plea deals. Did you decide, which I know the answer to this, but did you decide to offer one? And if so, when?
It was offered fairly early. And it was one that I knew the defense would never accept. And it was not well received with the Cochrans, except it would have required to admit what she did. And that was a stated goal of theirs. It wasn't everything they wanted, but it would have put an end to things. But I thought this woman in her head knew she was going to walk away from all of this. And she was still telling the bailiff that.
Really?
Like, oh yeah. Like on Thursday, after she said she was going to testify, that's what she said. She was overheard. This would get dismissed or maybe a misdemeanor.
If she would have testified, that would have went down into West Virginia history books as the craziest cross, I think, that you would have ever seen.
You should have seen the book that Tom had ready to cross out.
Oh,
Oh, really? Yeah.
was it bigger than the book of text messages for Stephanie?
Well, it was that extra day, that Friday, meant that I had even more time.
Oh, yeah.
And because she had declared Thursday she was going to testify.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a defendant change their mind ever. And in Raleigh County, they don't do this everywhere in the state, but in Raleigh County, what's called the Newman, which is just where the judge tells the defendant your rights, your risks, and what do you want to do. I had never seen one of those and still haven't seen one.
Right.
in
People
Raleigh
were surprised by that. They didn't think it was.
They always kick
Everyone
us
should
out.
be. Yeah.
But when I was a special prosecutor in Fayette County, I got to hear Judge Blake do it. I said, oh, that's what they do in these things. Or at least they do over here.
It would have almost been worth it just to say, because I spent a long time. I made a joke last night. Like, I thought she would sound like Optimus Prime from the Transformers. Like, I didn't even know what she sounded like.
Oh.
And then I heard her voice and I was like, that's pretty basic. Like, okay. I don't know what I was expecting.
Yeah.
But I would have, that would have been, I hate to use the word fun, but it would have been fun because it would have been bad.
I'm not.
She knew she couldn't testify.
Well, I would have bet my house that she was going to because of her arrogance, really, and her ability to manipulate people. She had a great track record right until she got caught. And now her life's on the line, and all she has to do is manipulate one of those jurors, and she's got another shot.
That's a good point.
So I was confident. I was so confident she was going to testify, and I was wrong.
Well, good thing you did not. Bet your house.
That would have been bad.
Yeah.
What was the deal that you offered her?
Yeah.
Like, what was the
thanks,
charge,
Jozy.
or what time would she?
I always make Chinese restaurant menu offers, one from column A, one from column B.
Right.
So she had a choice to do plea to the indictment. She would get mercy, and then she would get some credit for time served that would allow her to serve some time beyond her federal time. The odds of her taking that were slim, especially at that point. And then there was a second degree offer, which really there wasn't any evidence of second degree, but it's a plea. You'll come up with some facts to support it.
Yeah.
And that would have been less overall time, but she would have had to serve time again beyond her federal time, and would discharge that sentence, because if you plead to the indictment, it is still a life sentence.
Yeah.
Even if you're parole eligible. So if you're a really slub prisoner, you may be there a while.
Right.
But on a second degree, she would have an absolute cap of how many years she could serve.
What's the difference between the two? First and second, besides the
premeditation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So secondary would be like, I'm so mad, I'm going to kill you. And then she does it.
That's kind of borders more on a voluntary.
Okay. Gotcha.
But and there's a lot of changes coming in those three, because there's a lot of discussion right now in the difference between the levels of homicide. I'm not sure how that discussion is going to finally end up, but there is a lot of talk, and it's getting harder to make the distinguishing factors between first and all the way down to voluntary.
Who decided to include involuntary?
That was strictly the defense.
Mhm.
They offered that, and that one caused me some concern because
I was
a
worried.
jury doesn't know what that means.
Yeah.
That's the same as if she boosted a weed eater out of a shed. It's a misdemeanor. It's up to 1 year.
Like, whoops, I
Which is
accidentally
really
gave you insulin.
Which is
Yeah.
really 6 months. Well,
Mhm.
but in fairness to the defense, there were facts to support an involuntary, but basically by letting him languish on the couch all day and die.
Sure.
I mean, that's what that would have been.
That makes sense. And the way I kept looking at, sorry, Josie, the way I kept looking at it was it can't be involuntary. It's got to be first or nothing. Like they can't choose involuntary because if she lets him lay on the couch, she knows why he's on the couch and she knows what she did. So that's kind of what I was looking at.
That was just, that was scary.
It was.
Yeah.
It was really scary because if you got that one juror that's a holdout and says, well, I won't go for murder, but I'll go for this and sway them all.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been worse than an acquittal, in my opinion.
I was very worried about that. And it was like she was sprinkling alibis all day. It's like she did too much.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, I got to
Yes.
do all
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yes.
Like I got to send out all these texts to say, well, look at that text. You know,
She
and it
was
just
too
like,
smart by just a little bit.
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. Go
No,
ahead, Josie.
I think technically before the jury gives a verdict, like she could technically have still like, was the plea deal available up until
No.
the very end, or you just had it in the beginning? And,
It's got a drop dead date in it.
okay.
And we never heard a word. There was no response
No.
at
And this
all.
one was actually graduated. It was one of the offers expired on this date.
Okay.
And so if you don't accept it by this date, only this
Only
is
this
your
one's
offer.
left.
And then you have up
hence
until
the
this
Chinese
date, and then we're
menu.
done.
Gotcha.
And then it is always the defendant's right to plead guilty to their indictment,
hmm
but there would be no promise on our end as to
Right.
what would happen.
Gotcha.
You know what you should have done is like hand out a paper, like, tell you what, before we get to this plea deal, I got a huge opportunity for you. For the nominal fee of $200,000, I can get you involved in this new opportunity. You know, and then
Let me tell you
"I'm
about
just
your
kidding.
extended
I'm
car
just kidding."
warranty.
Yeah. Or, so funny thing, Natalie, I actually sell weapons to Saudi Arabia. And, we got this opportunity with this batch of Berettas. Like, really? But anyway, did you? Oh, I got to ask you. I'm sorry. I don't know if this is professional, but Stephanie talked about her getting a Salesperson of the Year award. And they were going to use her guns at the wall, at the Build the Wall.
I am not familiar with
Not me neither.
So okay, let me set this up for you. Stephanie goes to the house. Daphne's like, "Oh, Natalie, guess what? She got an award for best salesman of the year, salesperson, and they're gonna use." And this is no offense to Daphne. This is just my Daphne thing. They're gonna use her guns at the wall. Ain't that great? And Stephanie's like, "Oh yeah, that's awesome. Like she's 40, she's taking care of herself. This is really awkward." But anyway, so many things. Betsy Britland. Thank you for bringing up Betsy, because that was that the rebuttal witness? I think you brought up Betsy.
Heinzman.
Yes.
I think he brought her up twice. I feel
He
like
did.
Initially it was brought up because I think he was cut off from talking about Betsy
Yes, he
by
was.
Matthew. It was like Betsy, and there was like objection,
Yeah.
but then you brought it up again.
Is
Yeah.
it- oh yeah, that's the fake person.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You can't
just
have
kidding.
that.
And I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Mhm.
And then I don't know. Did y'all follow what we done with the
Yes.
community? Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, we put out, for those who don't know, I was like, oh, funny enough, Natalie had someone she worked with. It was a fake government contract worker named Betsy Britland. I put Britland. I spelled it wrong because that's what I thought I heard. And then there's a guy that got on there, shout out Dave, that said, hey, I used to go to church with Natalie. Fun fact.
Mhm.
That's what he said. And then there's a old lady that used to go to church there, and guess what her name was? And then it had like the drum roll version of text that had all these dots. Betsy Britland. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then we start looking her up, and I want to find out more about Betsy, but it turns out she had no family. She was like adopted by this really nice family in the church. It's like a kind of a handshake adopted grandma. And she sold Avon and she ran the nursery, and she died in October of 2018. And I'm like, how many coincidences are we
Mhm.
going to run into in this thing? But my goodness, this thing, I'm telling you, I think we know 20%, to be honest.
Oh,
I think there's so much out there.
like your iceberg graphic. Like we know what's above the surface.
Oh yes. Oh yes. It's crazy. All right. So plea deal. Getting into Heinzman. I felt really good after day one, but you had Heinzman and you had a really emotional testimony from Jennifer Davis. I guess you all wanted to show her early because of the murder weapon, essentially. Right.
Plus, she is just a very genuine person, and it's different from law enforcement. They can be very genuine, but they're professionals, and that's what they do. And Jennifer was just a friend who had been taken advantage of and felt so much guilt for providing the insulin.
Oh, yeah. And I know I'm sure she lives with regret every day, and I love these people. I don't know them. From what I know of them, they're just the most genuine people, her and Chris.
Absolutely.
And I just feel for her so much because, the second guessing that's went on for 6 years and everybody playing armchair quarterbacks saying, well, if I was there, I'd have done this. There was 9 people there. Mm-hmm. Okay. You don't know what you would have done. And not only that, Natalie was medical. When you put this in perspective of her and you working around her and knowing her personality, there's a lot of things that people didn't think about for a long time. Jennifer didn't even think about this for a while. It was like, wait a minute. I imagine she got up one day and was like, oh my goodness. You know what I mean? So
this is a good time to do a little inside baseball.
Yep.
The difference in tone from the first statements given by the Hamiltons and the Davises before they knew any of this stuff. They were very, very much in Natalie's camp. After the search warrant and after things were revealed, that's when things changed. But those witnesses gave multiple statements, and it's a different world before and after.
That's good to know.
I was going to say with Jennifer, though, I feel like to your point, when you're talking about like Natalie was definitely the one like leading her defense attorneys to ask questions. I feel like there's a lot of times, especially with when it was brought up, like whether or not Natalie was given permission to have the insulin in her home to administer it to the Davis's son. You could see multiple times where she was like, that's not true. Or like, yes, you could watch her and kind of see like, I guess foreshadowing that she was going to be very like critical of any witness that was like her friend.
Yeah, tilt that mic down a little bit, Tom. Bring it down just a little bit. There you go. Or turn it towards you a little bit. There we go. Yeah, okay. That looks good. That looks good. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, so I'm just wondering, like, did you notice that right away? And like, how did that play into like some of your questions? Like, because it's got to be tough facing your friend or your former friend who's now charged with killing, her husband, who you're also friends with, and you're tasked with presenting evidence that would convict her.
I think that weighed heavily on Jennifer Davis, but at the end, she wanted the truth to come out, and she just told her story and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, such courage. And then we got Trooper Hamilton after. What was the certain purpose there of bringing John into the mix on the first day?
Well, in timeline, he was the next guy to show up after we couldn't. That was another witness organization thing. The construction guy couldn't come down till Friday, and so John was there after him, and he was the next logical witness. So. JD probably wouldn't have testified that day, or if he would have, it would have been later. But he fit in, and his story flowed very well. Yeah. It turned out that he was a much bigger witness for a different reason, because when Natalie sent a text from Michael's phone, JD was sitting right there, and he was staring at Michael. I think JD was eating Cheetos or something, but Michael was sound asleep, and JD was there at the time when the fake text from Michael went out.
I need to start calling him JD. That's a good name.
So that's what I've known him as for 30 years.
Yeah. And he's been a trooper, I don't know, 20 plus years. I mean, forever. So, all right. So that's the end of day one. How are you feeling after that first day? You feeling good? You got the jitters out, kind of, or are there any?
I mean, I definitely had jitters for sure. Because I mean, this is, for us, this is like the trial of the century. I have my friend Chris Nelson is texting me, and he's saying, "Well, how are you feeling? This is the trial of your career, and you've just started your career." So I'm anxious, but once we get in there, it all just sort of falls away. Like the second you stand up from that table, it's gone. And you're talking to these people. And we had done that. So
yep,
it's easy to fall back into.
Tom, are you running again?
No, not a chance.
Here's what, hey,
He's got 2 more years, though.
Yeah.
Are we announcing your candidacy?
All right, now we'll see. We've got some inner workings. We're talking to people and
no pressure,
kind of determining who's going to run.
Well,
got a lot going.
If you want to run for governor, I'll vote for you.
Let me put some more pressure. 3 big time gifted prosecutors have been in this jurisdiction that I can name. Felix Polly, Kristen Keller, and Brian Parsons were just, they have a gift. They're gifted. I mean, they can do things that the rest of us just can't do. Ashley Acord is one of those people. She's just got it. It's it's a gift. It's bored.
Yep.
That's your campaign.
There
you go.
But let me tell you that there's two different skill sets though, because Kristen Keller was one of those 3 gifted trial lawyers. Kristen Keller had other negatives in terms of being the elected prosecutor. And I'm not going to beat up on Kristen Keller, but I'm just telling you, it's different skill sets. Being a fantastic trial lawyer and being the manager of the prosecutor's office they're worlds apart. And if it's tough to blend those two together, but Ashley Acord is a gifted trial lawyer. And this was her second trial.
Second trial, Ashley. That's amazing.
Rough televised all of them now.
All right, let's get some tears flowing. What's Ashley's best qualities? What did she bring to the case that you would?
She just got an it. Some people have it, and very, very few. I mean, really, if you think about it, of all the lawyers that are out there, relatively few of them are actually trial lawyers. And of that group of people, the people that are the Ashley Acords are a minuscule amount. That just doesn't happen. Those are the people that go to Manhattan or could be anywhere and they're just something about them.
Please stay
They
here.
come up.
Yeah, please stay, Ashley.
This is home.
they think of things to do in a trial right then and there. The rest of us, at 3:30 the next morning, say, "Damn it, why didn't I ask that?" But they've got it. The it people just have it. And it's a gift. That's
great.
all it is.
Well, I got to give you some flowers, Tom, too, because I think you all were the perfect combination of what was needed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think Ashley, like mentioning being introverted, I think she, when you see people who are doing exactly what they were meant to do, I think that's what I feel like. And I didn't know Ashley before this. And just watching you all work together, and you don't let ego get in your way. And you can really tell that, like, there's not an ego there. And I think I've noticed with this position, there's a lot of egos floating around, it seems.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah. So,
but y'all were also the opposites of Matthew and Stanley too. I felt like it was like a perfect pairing both ways in a way where
It really goes beyond that. There were five of us that were the core, plus Jeff Shoemate as the investigator who pitched in too. But the 2 investigators, Bob Heinzman and Tim Bledsoe, Susan Delp, who was like having your very own guide to get you through the forest, and then Ashley and I. And the 5 of us have talked about that. It was just, Ashley put it in the form of a recipe. And that's really what it was. If you take any one of those 5 people out of there, it just didn't work the same. I don't think.
That's good that you put it like that, because Heinzman seemed like a computer. He's like, it just seemed like, okay, let me access the computer part of my brain. You're wrong. There's why. So yeah, it's cool to know that. And him and Bledsoe retired now, right?
Both.
Yes.
Yeah, both retired.
Bob's a lawyer up in Morgantown.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he went to law school after he retired.
Probably.
I
And
think he graduated the year after I did.
Oh yeah, he just fooled around,
For
piddled
fun.
in law school. Was like, oh, I'll try this out. That's great. Well, cool. All right. So we're into day 2, and during day 2, we lead off with Stephanie Hamilton, and her cross upset me. I feel like they were really unfair to her. She was trying to answer a lot of questions that they wouldn't let her answer, mainly about the unit question.
Yeah.
And how much does it take to kill a body? And that's kind of, I felt like this day is when a lot of smoke was being started to be like thrown. Is that kind of how y'all felt?
I definitely felt like they tried to treat Stephanie as if she had been qualified as an expert witness.
Mhm.
And we didn't do that to her. We didn't need to do that to her. Sure, she's qualified. She knows what she's talking about. I mean, she's a PA and she's great at it. But that being said, we didn't need to put her in that role. And I feel like they were trying to push her into an area that was really not necessary and she was not there for. I don't know that she expected anything like that to happen, to be pressed so hard on medical terminology.
Yeah,
things.
I felt like a lot of the defense or the prosecution's witnesses, they were saying, well, it's as much as your fault as it is hers. Like saying that she was what is it called when you're
a
a
mandatory reporter.
mandatory reporter?
But that also, I'm not so sure that came from the defense attorneys. I think that came from the defendant,
Natalie.
because she was really driving this bus, and that would be the kind of question. Now, can I absolutely point to evidence and say that? No, I can't. But that would be the kind of thing she would do. And it's also consistent with her whole personality. It's everybody's fault but mine.
Well,
Yeah.
she told the Register Herald that when she interviewed in 2019 that I had a medical professional and a state trooper within an hour.
Why didn't they tell me?
Yeah. So I remember, so she used them as a scapegoat from the very beginning. So that would track too again
Yes,
with kind of questions.
absolutely.
That,
Yeah. And to put people in, that's where, they had to stay silent for 6 years. Stephanie was wanting to say she was medical too. Like, you're not putting all these things in perspective here. I checked this. It was fine. I checked that. And she let him believe, when he does this, he sleeps it off.
Yeah.
So when you put all this stuff in perspective, it makes total sense on why it happens.
Stephanie had a remark that I thought really rang through it. And when Michael was passed out, Natalie was his voice.
yes, I remember that.
And I thought, boy, that really says it.
Sure.
And she was saying, we're not taking him to the hospital.
Yeah. And I think that rang true. And even later when she's like, wait a minute, he's still, are you kidding me? Like, he's still passed out? Like, what are we doing?
Well, after he lost control of his bladder, Stephanie was really, she was calling John, and it's hard to imagine anybody would let thehave spouse do that.
And obviously what happened was the swelling got so big to where it hit that nerve, and then he lost control, and there was it probably would have been impossible to save him at that point, I think, but we'll never know. But
we won't.
Even still, it's insane. So then we have the banker, which was rather entertaining.
Goodness.
Thank you. But the purpose of this was
the purpose of Court Nexus was to, from his background at Bank of America, where he's no longer there, but that meeting set up for the 6th that never took place. Was a crucial part of our case. And what led up to that meeting was important too, because the both Cochrans had to send a volume of information to Bank of America just to get to the Court Nexus level. And he was supposed to be a guy that dealt with high-end customers, clients. And that's what she was having him pretend to be.
he was the first guy to kind of fire back he was trying to say, you were mad, weren't you? He's like, well, it kind of wastes my time when people cash checks that don't exist, or whatever he was, basically saying. But I just thought that exchange was rather humorous. It's like, of course, like they're a bank. They're waiting on this high dollar client.
Max has held his own.
Yeah.
Oh, with Matthew? Yeah, he definitely did.
Yeah. He was the first one to kind of, I want to hit back with, everyone else, which I mean, I know you got to be professional, but I really enjoyed.
He was professional. He just didn't take any abuse.
Mhm.
Yeah. Didn't take no
I just like when Matthew, like, Judge, tell him to be nice. That's what I felt like he was saying.
Yeah.
Tell him to be nice to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, everyone is on trial. It felt like, well, I mean, obviously they are, but
yeah,
I just felt like the crosses were like, I didn't agree with, I mean, now granted, it's their case to run, but I didn't agree with what they were doing. But like you said, I mean, it was all coming, I think it was coming from Natalie for sure. And what are they supposed to do? All right. And then we have the pilot, the dude who probably could bench press this table with one hand. But his was good in showing that basically the flight was canceled and Natalie canceled it.
And then tried to reschedule.
Yeah.
Somewhat. Yeah. Like right after.
Right. Sort of.
Yeah.
She was also making plans for lunch, by the way. But,
and then making plans with the banker too, right? At the same time.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
All while
Michael was unconscious.
I mean,
later
of course, that's the natural thing you do.
And didn't mention him. I'm sick. Her text was that she was sick. She never mentioned the fact that Michael has been unconscious for hours, was never going to regain consciousness. Never even mentioned him.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of telling.
Oh, yeah. And her sugar was 280 in the text to Jennifer.
Right.
And, because of the steroid shots. And then all of a sudden it was never mentioned again. And there was no glucometer found because I was kind of pointing out like, well, let me put myself on the defensive side. Some smoking guns would be in her favor of showing, first off, any Mexican supplement, whatever the definition of that is. A glucometer was one of them too. She said she checked his sugar, saying it was 145. This glucometer, they save readings if you have one, and it was never found. So
Plus,
I thought,
wouldn't you ask the question, why are you taking this guy's
sugar
blood glucose level?
like she was shoving it in there. Like,
why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found out too. So I don't know if y'all listened to Stephanie Hamilton's interview with us, but she said, yeah, we went to the dish and like she sat me down and she was like, I know you're wanting to know what happened to Michael. And she was like, well, no, not really. I was just like coming to eat with my friend, be supportive. She's like, well, he started taking insulin shots, basically. She just starts bringing these things up. And when she got raided, she said they took everything. They even took the insulin I had for, I can't remember the Davis's kid's name, but for him, So she started sprinkling that little bit in there just that ultimately you turned against her. Just wasn't, it's like you're doing too much. But anyway,
I want to ask too, so at this point, we start hearing about cancer from a couple of different witnesses. I think she maybe said to the banker, I was throwing up all night or something along those lines. So I wanted to ask too, what was the strategy behind, because I think you guys decided early on that you weren't going to really pursue proving whether or not she had cancer. So what was because obviously I think a lot of people were curious, they kind of wanted that information, but what was the strategy behind not really pursuing that route of disproving her or,
It was another level of just many falsehoods that this defendant told. But that one I think hits close to home. Who among us doesn't know somebody with cancer? And if you're going to fake it, that takes on an ick factor that, but we figured at some point that would come out. We really didn't have a direct attack on that, but it became readily apparent that there was.
The defense solidified it for you.
Yes, they did. They helped
by calling Dr. Halsey.
We thought that might happen.
That was,
yeah.
I'm just going to say, you all planned on letting them bury themselves, because to me, I was like, if you prove she doesn't have cancer, she did this. If she proves she did have cancer, she may get off. That's how I was feeling. And she never provided one record. Not only that, they called Dr. Halsey. Y'all didn't. They call him and he says, literally, I asked for records. I was never given records. Duke has never seen her as a patient. You have to have CLL. And then we find out later there's text messages that were submitted in evidence that weren't brought up, that she literally talks about going to Duke, being in chemo, going in remission.
All sorts of treatments that she was having that she never had.
Yeah. And then we learned last night she was shaving
her
bald
head.
spots in her head of like, and then
we knew about that one too.
Did you?
Yeah.
Was it just, do you think like, because I think one of the last questions you asked Bledsoe was like, did you find any evidence that she had cancer? So you kind of brought it up then without going through the whole, because I feel like if you were really going to pursue that route, you're going to have to bring in all of the doctors that she talked to, like really get it. Like that would have been a whole, probably another week. Yeah. Was that kind of part of the decision why you could still bring it up that it was false without like really going to all like the nitty gritty of it?
It really wasn't necessary to delve deeply into it, because the fear at that point is, if we focus so hard on this, are we going to lose the jury? Are they going to get distracted from what's actually important? Because yes, it's important that she lied about having cancer. I mean, and we know where that came from. Toni McCall got on the stand and she talked about, in the mercy phase, about how her husband Curtis passed away in 2015 from the same type of cancer that Natalie later said that she had.
The gall.
So
you have to say this. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole time but that's why I think a short trial helped you all hugely, because they really kept digging the hole, everything that they would do. And then their witnesses, I know when you all rested, I was kind of like, whoa, this is a little quick, but I think that ultimately helped. So, and then them having access to all this information on the back end, I think is why people were so confused on why it was so quick. Because what's an average verdict like? I don't know. Isn't national average like 6 hours? I mean, it just varies.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It takes them as long as it takes them, and that can be a long time or a short time.
Yeah, the mercy verdict, I think, was actually longer.
No, it was about an hour.
About an hour.
Oh,
about
it was
hour.
longer than we thought it would be.
Maybe
I
that-
think.
yeah.
But yeah, no, it was.
But
like
they ought to take some time.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
But our whole strategy was to focus. When it's a circumstantial case, you can't have any drift. People have to be able to see all of these pieces fit together. And that was our plan. That was our litigation strategy. And that we carried that out. And then my gifted partner here absolutely put it together with one of the better closings, if not the best closing you're ever going to see.
I mean, I'm biased because, she is in our county, but it's kind of the best one I've ever seen. I mean, and I've watched, like, it's better than the Johnny Cochran close. Like, I'm just saying. So, yeah, I agree. Well, awesome. So, let me see, day 2, we end with, or hang on, Chris Davis gets up and after the pilot. And this was, I think up to that point, the most emotional. What did you all feel in the courtroom? I think this was the most emotional turning point as far as the viewing audience goes.
He's so genuine, and he's just a great guy. And that just comes out.
And she filed an ethics complaint.
Oh, yeah. Which went nowhere, but she filed it anyhow.
And thankfully, you gave him a chance, like, go ahead and address.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was going to be.
You have to know that that's coming. When you cut somebody off. You have to know.
Would you like to know what happened? No, thank you.
It was dismissed. Yeah. And then you guys was like, can you go ahead and have a chance to address the ethics complaint? And that's basically what she was doing. I've had so many people reach out. One thing I think is still a tragedy that's going to remain open is the damage that the youth sports people have went through. And there hasn't been any closure. It was basically overshadowed by this almost $3 million discovered in the Ponzi scheme.
And then the murder.
Yeah, and then the murder, which obviously these are important things, but I think, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars here with these people, where she was buying gifts for people that were confiscated by the FBI or whatever later on. And all of these people who went through financial audits and a year and a half of slander in the community, and people not knowing and just trusting that all these, petitions Natalie was filing, because she's very vindictive. She would file complaints on, if you accuse her of stealing, she's not only going to accuse you, she's going to write everyone she can think of to accuse you legally of stealing. And then they got to go through that. So I think that's one thing that's still there's so many open wounds, but that's one that there's a lot of people, it's like really, really jaded and hurt and feel like they kind of were forgotten about, and because it's important. Obviously $3 million in a murder in the grand scheme of things is going to be more important, but even still they were hurt too.
Yeah.
And the ripple effects is what people don't really realize.
Yeah, especially when little kids are the victim. That's even worse.
Yeah. Oh, Stephanie's kid had like some life-saving surgery and had to have his freaking bow confiscated because Natalie was buying this gift
with stolen money.
Yeah.
And then all the people with the scholarships, the in-memory scholarships, and I looked this up. This is like a thing with people who murder their partners. They'll come up with this thing to get all of this clout.
Yeah.
And then they'll name it in their murdered spouse's name. And it's like, what in the world is going on? The most, I've said it, like the most diabolical human to possibly come out of West Virginia. I don't know anyone else. They had the one guy from Boston that died in one of the prisons, but he's not from here.
Whitey Bulger.
Yeah, Whitey Bulger.
He's in the same prison where she is.
That's what I heard. Which I'm getting all kinds of crazy messages that I can't even bring up about commissary and all kinds of things, but who knows? But all right, so Chris Davis goes. Everyone's a wreck. They show the photo. I think, was it that day that he ended up, that's when he was done. He was like, can I leave? Or
Yeah, it was during I don't know who crossed Chris.
I think it was Victor, wasn't it?
He was, that's right. It was Hero. But I remember it was brought up at the very, very end. And then like I forget who showed it, but he was like, can I leave? Like, are we done? And it was apparent that like,
well, they had his photo up.
Yeah, Michael's photo.
And he just, you can just see the pain in his eyes.
Well, I wanted to ask, like, for you guys, obviously, like, you can't, it's hard to just go up there and like start talking about Michael, because obviously, like, the focus is Natalie and what she did. And the defense obviously they described Michael in a certain way, the drugs, the supplements, So, like, how did you guys attempt to, like, sprinkle in, who Michael actually was and, what he meant to his friends and like that kind of thing to kind of combat what the defense was doing without blatantly saying, like, describe Michael to me, because they wouldn't have never let you
was that not allowed?
It just it would have taken away from what we were there for. We want to talk about Michael, and we want to talk about all these people that loved him, which is why we would give witnesses on the opening of their testimony the opportunity to say how they knew them, and that kind of gave them an opening to do that until they were eventually objected to. That happened pretty frequently.
I think Michael was forgotten about throughout the whole trial.
It's very hard.
Yeah. And the juror said, I didn't see a picture of him until I saw his driver's license.
Yeah.
All the other pictures was him laying unconscious.
Yeah. Or a very questionable strategy was the defense flipping up the autopsy photo. I could not understand why they did that or what they gained out of that. But that was another one of those things that the state probably could have objected to, but it was such a bizarre tactic. Not only did it not help the defense, I thought it actually turned people against the defense, probably in a significant amount.
It put a soul into him because you instantly hear Donna and the pain of this mom.
Yeah.
Well, then you also see Natalie, and I feel like she just stares at it because it's not up for long. But again, you have someone who's clearly emotional by seeing that, and then the defendant charged with murdering him. Yeah. Nothing.
Yeah. I really am. If you do interview Stan and Matthew, that would be a question I would like for you to ask, because I have no earthly idea why they did that.
Get him in here, Tom. I told him, I wouldn't disrespect him. I'd just feel like, okay, let's kind of have it out. It'd be fun to kind of go back and forth.
I heard Stanley will only make an appearance if it goes to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Until then.
Well, I mean, those guys had their plan and they executed their plan. But that one, like the confused dog look.
It was awful.
Yeah.
And the jury hears all this. And Judge Kirk, to his credit, brings me another question we got to ask about the letter with Donna.
Oh, yeah.
But I felt like Donna was another person who has had to hold on to all this pain and not be able to really speak in years. And then she was there every day looking Natalie right in the face, was like, this is going to happen. I'm going to do everything I can. And in that, she got overzealous in writing a letter, which got her removed as a witness, correct?
Right.
So what can we talk about that? I'm curious what was in the letter.
The substance of the letter was basically Donna being frustrated, but the key to the letter is this. She knew, and Ed knew, that Ed could sit there and watch. Donna could not, because Donna was going to testify. And because the witnesses were all sequestered, Donna can't know what's going on in the courtroom. We talked about that. Talked about it with Ed. The morning, about 8:15, we're getting ready to go to the next day, and Ed's downstairs. So, Ed, I got about 30 seconds, buddy. What can I do for you? Because we're getting ready to start the day's activities. He says, well, you got to see this. And it's a 2-page letter with 4 pages of attachments of all the grievances against what the defense had brought out. But the first line of the letter, addressed to me, says, Ed and I were talking about the testimony yesterday.
Oh, yeah. So she'd been watching the trial.
She'd been getting it from Ed,
right,
apparently. And, there might be some people that would put that letter in a shredder and just go on, but that ethically, that just couldn't happen.
That's why you're the man, Tom. Because, obviously everyone was, she got to speak later and Mama Bear spoke.
She did.
But that obviously would have been huge for you all. It's probably the biggest witness he had. I don't know. I don't know. But as far as the humanity of it, if that makes sense, putting a face on Michael, that was probably one of the biggest witnesses. And you still had his best friend, and you still had a bunch of people who had a lot of good things.
But there ain't nothing like Mama.
Ain't nothing like Mama.
Yeah.
And an only son. It was her only kid.
Yeah.
Do you know what happened on the defense side of why they never called the parents, Natalie's parents? Because Stanley told me that Daphne was also disqualified in some way, but he never said why or what. I don't know if you'd heard the story or.
They were both on the witness list.
Yeah.
And then neither. I got to say that Mr. Jessup seems to me like a genuinely good guy.
Oh, yeah.
He really does. The jury never heard this, but he actually went around out of his pocket and tried to pay victims of the Ponzi scheme to try and avoid prosecution for his daughter. But
how much money does
Jeff
he have?
Shoemate, probably not as much as he had. But Jeff
about $250,000 short.
Yeah.
Or more.
Or
I think
more.
it's $276, I think.
Jeff Shoemate interviewed him, and he said, there's really nothing else I can tell you other than what the state already knows. And I thought, as a dad, that one hurts.
Yeah, I felt like, too, watching him his just made me sad. I just saw a dad trying to plead for his daughter's life. You know, he didn't necessarily throw the shade like I thought others did blatantly. But I was saying the whole time, I was like, someone say she's guilty. If you get up there and say she's guilty, she's going to get it. But they just couldn't do it. And it was the exact opposite. So I just was like, well, that's it. But all right. So we are into day 3. And you all start out with Jason Bowen. And he's the contractor who came and helped carry him to the couch.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other one that came and helped actually died in a car wreck because,
Miller
of
died
course,
in a car wreck.
yeah, so many things in and I've obviously thoughts and prayers to his family. You know, it's awful, but anything with this case is just not normal. But what was the main purpose of that? Just the odd, you know, experience?
There were a couple of things. One, and again, instead of calling 911, you call 2 construction guys to pick your husband off the floor and put him on a couch. I thought that was a rather curious response to the situation. The other thing was that he just mentioned that Michael had said to him, I felt like I'd been poisoned. And that got us to thinking that we can't account for the late fall of 18 problems that Michael had.
Previous episode that involved a potential seizure.
Yeah. And all of those, a lot of that information was coming from one Natalie Cochran. But aside from that, there was never a diagnosis of any of that stuff. The suspected mold, suspected seizures. There was no, this is what it is.
So you all saw the records.
Yeah.
And there was no seizure marked on it. Okay, that's good to know.
Suspected. That's all it was.
Said suspected. Okay, so that could be basically Natalie said he fell on the ground, started shaking. And then they say, oh, well, that sounds like a seizure. Yeah. I mean, okay. And, you know, obviously they're not thinking, oh, this is a murdering, you know, psychopath. They were like, oh, well, I'm sure she's being honest, you know. So, because there's a lot of theories out there that we'll never know that this wasn't the first attempt.
That we'll never know.
Yeah. And that's good to mention.
Till she writes her tell-all book.
What about the Dandelion Ministry Group? Is the Son of Sam law in West Virginia? Let's figure this out. Do you know what that is?
I know what it is. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't believe she can profit off of it.
She cannot profit off of this.
She can't in West Virginia.
This will go to her victims.
But what about her devotional? Where's that money? Like, since it's not, is it?
I'm not sure. Does she get any money for that?
It's on sale.
It's on Amazon. I mean, don't buy it, people, but it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
And there's another name on it.
Yes. Her daughter's name.
That's right.
Yes,
that's right.
So,
yeah, I don't know.
And that's the issue that I have with it. And I can't tell you that I honestly know where the proceeds from that go.
Nor do I.
But I think there may have been an attempt to circumvent that by putting the daughter.
I think it's grounds. You could probably get that pulled.
And book 2 is at the publishers, right? That's what we were.
I mean, you let Amazon know that a convicted murderer has a book on Amazon. I don't know. I mean, it sounds they done this for purposes like OJ. He could sign autographs, but he wasn't convicted yet. So that's how he got by with it. So now she's convicted. I don't know. We'll see. But and the frustrating part there is, you know, she's writing these letters saying like, oh, I'm going to pay $1,000 a month. I'm going to do all this. And it's like, she's paying like $25 a month with it, which if there's no interest, I added it up to pay off the fine is going to take 8,333 years.
Well, I think if you
pay off,
go back to like her, like what you said, like she never thought she'd be found guilty of the murder. And also like in the federal sentencing, like she thought she was going to get out and go back to her normal life. Like she's like, I've been applying to jobs. I'm going to be a pharmacist. You know, I'm going to go back to my 6-figure salary. Like she just had this thought that like her life would go back to normal. And I think the same thing with the trial. Like she didn't think she'd get convicted. She'd serve out her time for the federal charges and then she'd go on, you know.
I think she was actually stunned that it went to trial.
Really?
I don't think she ever thought this case was going to be. And really, there was a pretty good track record to support that. It took a long time to get it to trial.
Well, imagine the total lack of empathy and the narcissism and the Machiavellianism that you have to have to do anything she's done in the past 8 years. You know? So it's like, obviously, she's a sociopath who can't put herself in other people's shoes. So, of course, she's like, you're not going to convict me. I've helped out Zambia. Imagine how many tanks of water I've provided to the Zambians of the world. But anyway, so I think you're right, for sure. And then we get to the FBI chemist, which was important because we start seeing this photo, which I went insane on after seeing the high-resolution version on 2020. I said, OMG, are you kidding me? Because they were showing this, first off, Raleigh County Courthouse, I love you. We got to get some upgrades.
There's supposed to be the battle of the equipment, and our Supreme Court has total control of that through their tech division. They are the most unhelpful people on the planet. They put junk in your courtroom. We have a VCR player.
Hey.
I mean, it may not play beta, but it is so frustrating. We deserve better than that. I mean, Judge Dimlick's old courtroom downstairs is the newest stuff, and it was hardly state of the art when they put it in.
I mean,
but July 1st, in theory, they're going to start replacing all of this stuff in the courthouse.
I mean, let's put monitors in front of the jury box.
Well, they're going to put a big, as I understand the plan, they're going to take the projectors and all that stuff and do away with and have a big screen TV opposite the jury. What a novel idea. Welcome to 1990.
Ashley's going to need these tools.
Ashley is going to need these tools. You're right.
Yeah.
And but we'll see if it actually happens. We called 10 days before trial. They wouldn't call us back. And then when you do get somebody, they'll tell you the judge has to make this request. Well, there was a couple problems with that. Judge Kirkpatrick was senior status judge, so he didn't have a courtroom per se, but it doesn't matter. I mean, Moose Ahmed, longest serving law clerk in Raleigh County. He was Judge Burnside's clerk forever, and now he's Judge Kirby's. I thought, and Moose is a big guy, a very big guy. I thought he was going to drive down there and actually take care of business.
Just pick the projector up, throw it in the dumpster, light it on fire. I was standing there when he was talking to these people. He says, "You have the tail wagging a dog. You're here to help us, not the other way around." He still didn't get much in the way of results. Yeah.
They're just, it's tightly controlled, but they won't help you with anything.
Yeah, that projector, I was waiting on someone to pour diesel fuel in it to get it cranked up. I was like, this thing ain't even, this is so garbage. But the frustration there was the defense, and the frustrating part for me is they knew the high-resolution photo blatantly showed that there was at least 400 units missing out of this bottle. And you can tell that after watching 2020. And I missed that original photo showed in the court, and it was still pixelated, but you could still see it was empty.
Because it was a picture, it was a photocopy. And that's what you guys had to show. Because it had to be from the report. You couldn't just, I guess, take your own picture.
That was taken from the search.
Yeah.
And then the FB1 guy had it too. But that was also, we had to put that evidence in, but it gave the defense a chance to do all sorts of things. That the bottle's full, the bottle's this, the bottle's that. And as the FBI guy testified, there was no way to tell from a picture the contents of that bottle.
You could tell the other picture. The first one you could tell. Like, I mean, you could see like there's air, and then this is where it starts, and then there's the fluid. But so to clarify, that was taken right after they confiscated it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was taken at the Cochran residence.
That was before they drained.
Oh yeah, that was
fluid.
Before. That was long before it was ever sent anywhere.
Yeah.
State police took that photo, not the FBI.
I mean, the fact that you guys had to print out everything, like you couldn't just like hook up your computer and display like from a,
It's a lot of work.
No, I understand. Everything had.
I felt like I was in middle school and I had to go to the window to like sharpen my pencil in this old crank. It's like, all right,
trash can underneath.
Get our pencil sharpened, start the class.
That's right. I mean, some of that equipment is is dated 1995. And
People are giving me crap online about not knowing how to use that projector. And I was like, it's literally almost as old as I am.
You got to kickstart this thing. Like, it's not Ashley's fault.
no, it was not at all.
And bailiff's IT, is that correct?
Yeah, he got stuck with it. Again, they don't train these people to use any of this stuff. They go figure it out.
Gotcha.
And bailiffs come and go. And by the time a bailiff gets pretty good at operating that stuff, we used to have touch screens.
Yeah.
That you could draw on and stuff like that. But when they crapped out, nobody replaced them.
Mm.
My goodness. All right. Well.
But that's your tax dollars not at work.
Yeah. This is good to know because we wouldn't have known this if it wasn't televised. I just figured, of course, they have state-of-the-art stuff, Yes, they're buying every kid 6 years old an iPad in the county. Of course, they're going to have good stuff.
Some of this stuff goes back to the Carter administration. I mean, really, it's awful.
Yeah.
And we'll see if come July 1st, they actually do something about it.
Right.
Hopefully they got a lot of bad PR. And some of it is a reaction to the excesses of the Supreme Court a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
the $30,000 couch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
the rug.
Right. Tile floors and all that stuff. But why should the local people pick up the tab for those excesses? And that's really what it amounts to.
Yeah.
If they're going to have control of the equipment, and that's what they demand. We illegally hooked up a computer to it. You have to have their permission to do that.
That's great. All right. So, and the sucky thing is if you lose, it's your fault. Did you feel the pressure of that?
Well, not on the equipment stuff. I mean, I'm used to that.
Well, like personally, did you feel pressure from the community of like, it's pretty evident she did this. We got to get this right.
I'll tell you what. The prosecution was a success no matter what the verdict was because we did the best we could. And if that's all if you do the best you can and you're satisfied that is the best you could do, that's success. That's John Wooden.
That's a good answer, Tom. I'm motivated now. So what about you, Ashley? Did you feel pressure or were you kind of like, you know what? It's whatever.
There was definitely pressure because the consensus was that nobody wanted to touch this case with a 10-foot pole. Mm-hmm. And we were like, all right, well, we're going to do it. And we're going to do the best we can.
It's assigned to us. We're going to do the best we can.
And at the end of the day, I felt like when we rested our case, and especially after we had closed, I felt like, well, we've left it all on the floor. That's it. So, it's in the jury's hands now. And I was encouraged by making eye contact with some of the jurors during closing for sure. Because I can see some of them going, yeah. Some of them are like nodding along with me and I'm like, okay, I feel okay now.
That's a great feeling. It is.
When you have the room. Of course, it's like that squared. But as an introvert, like I know I suffer from a lot of anxiety.
Yes.
I'm kind of the same way. Like I look like this joyful dude, but I'm a mess. Like this is all a mask. So I don't know if it's like that for you. I'm sure you got it well put together.
It was a lot like that during the trial. I was sick almost every day. Like I was telling Tom the whole time, like I'm nauseous. I'm gonna throw up. I'm afraid I'm gonna throw up in the courtroom.
Right.
And to his credit, he was so good to me during all that. He was like, hey, am I putting too much pressure on you? Like, is there something that, you're going to do that you need me to do? I know how hard anxiety is. Like, what can I do to help you? So he was very much there for me and supporting me the whole time. And that helped a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah. Cause and you held it off well. And I think that's what the greats feel is they feel that type of emotion, but they can channel it. And it didn't come through that you were nervous at all to me.
No.
Yeah. So, bravo. But yeah, I would imagine, you go out to like Cheddar's and someone sees it like, hey, go get him, Ashley.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, yeah. Okay. This
we
is
had
great.
a lot of that.
Yeah. That's great. Well, cool. All right. So we're into day 4. And I hope y'all are comfortable. If anyone needs a bathroom break, this is not live, but I'm good if everyone else is. So we go into Diane Krieger, which to me was probably the biggest smoking gun
She's really good.
of her saying like, okay, well, it's, 90-some%. I'm 90-some% positive that like he died of insulin shock.
Well, I like that she ruled out a lot of the possible
12 other causes.
Yeah. And like half of those Stanley mentioned. And I really like that. I remember like going back and listening to her testimony and like putting in my article that list that she gave. I thought that was really impressive.
I did too.
Did you know that she was going to?
Yes.
So you
absolutely
had that.
did. She is really a very special witness to me. And she's the one that's trying to change the protocol in all emergency rooms on insulin.
Mm-hmm.
But the irony of it is she didn't believe in our case.
Really?
In the beginning. And that's because she misunderstood the significance of circumstantial evidence. She says, this isn't a very good case medically. And we talked and we talked. And I said, and it came down to, she's never thought about circumstantial evidence. Once we got over that hurdle, she was a killer witness for the state.
Yeah. And was it her testimony where the glucose was revealed, or was it Uribe's?
I think it was before then.
Actually,
or was it before then?
I think both of them knew.
It was brought up a few times.
Yeah.
And with that glucose chart, so basically,
the glucose chart.
Now
That was,
which was one of the numbers that Tom, I imagine he was sitting there, watching Jeopardy one night and was like, I got it. I'm going to print out two big numbers and one's going to be 0. And then I'm going to have this big eloquent thing and it's going to go great. And then one's going to be 21, which, me again, as a diabetic, that's, your sugar's not 21 unless you are a diabetic or you've had too much insulin or potential, highly unlikely, but potential tumors, which they proved that he did not have.
Right.
And the defense was, their point of bringing up the decomposition photo was saying, well, isn't it true that he's too decomposed to even tell or not? And then they ended up.
Dragovich said the exact opposite.
Yeah.
That tumor tissue is, for lack of a better term, tougher, and it would still be there. So, they divided and conquered themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and on this chart, it had 21, and then they would treat it, then it would go back down. My theory there is he was jacked up with so much insulin. I don't know if she necessarily gave him 2 shots. I think he just had so much in his system that it was constantly feeding into his tissue and just bringing it down, kept bringing it down. And then, him opening his eyes, already having brain damage, gave Donna a false hope, unfortunately. And then all of a sudden he had it in his will to go to hospice, is what Natalie said. But anyway, so Diane Krieger gets up, does a really, really good job. She's there for an eternity.
Yeah.
And
with difficulties at first.
Yeah.
Again, getting her to even
Equipment stuff.
Tech difficulties.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where
and then
we ended up using the telephone for the voice.
My gosh, yes.
And muting everybody's sound.
She had to hold her phone up.
Yeah.
So that was the audio, and then
it came through the court's phone system.
Yeah. And I know the production guys, and I know he was sitting there saying, why don't they have a digital feed that I can put into this trial? Because everyone's sitting there watching it like this.
Yeah.
And that's the only option they had, was to shoot the projector, because this thing, so everyone knows that's the only option they had. They had to shoot the projector because it's, from the 90s, and they didn't have digital feeds that could have went into their switcher. So I felt for the production crew there. I also felt for him having to turn his light down the first day.
oh gosh, it's blinding me.
Yeah. So I was like, oh man. But I know those Cucumber and Company, anyone, if you need live streaming around here, they are the best. Dwayne is so nice, but they did a great job. Go ahead, Jozy. You got a question?
Oh no, I was going to.
Oh, sorry. I thought
About the next one.
Gotcha. So yeah, Diane Krieger, slays it. There's not really anything on basically all the crosses are like, but you don't really know.
Right.
And there's like, no, I know. I really know. And then
Well, you
like,
can't
but you
give
don't.
me 100%. That's what they wanted, 100%.
Yeah. And nobody
Who in the
give-
medical field
It's not
does
gonna-
anything at 100%?
Sure.
None.
who does anything ever 100%,
Right.
a professional. It's just, you don't do that. But anyway, so yeah, then we move on to the Earl Glim. Am I pronouncing that right? Forensic examiner.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the other FBI.
I think we missed him that first go around talking. What was the purpose of bringing him up?
He showed that there was a puncture in the
That's
bottle.
right. Yeah.
And there wasn't one.
And the other bottle was unopened.
Yes.
And that was Ashley's witness, and I thought that was very helpful testimony.
Mhm.
Yeah, which was important because it was stated that Jennifer gave it brand new.
New.
And brand new
Correct.
bottles have a cap on it. They don't have puncture wound or
Right.
puncture wound. And then, the bottle being half empty, which the jury ended up seeing. I mean, you can blatantly see in that photo that it's half empty, would lead you to believe, okay, well, who's taking insulin? Did the bodybuilding aspect ever come up on the defense's side during the trial? I know she mentioned to some of his friends that he was taking insulin for bodybuilding.
They threw that out a few times. But again, the problem they had was one aspect of their case was this guy was so sickly, he was going to die any minute. And at the same time, he was so healthy and he was doing all his bodybuilding and using all these Mexican supplements. And it was just pick a lane, guys.
Calling him Mr. Universe. I'm like,
Oh,
dude,
yeah.
this is
Cute.
not going over well.
I think one thing that I kind of noticed from watching that 2020 special the other day was when the insulin got brought up, it was like, well, if Natalie's going to make the claim that her husband is using insulin for bodybuilding, then you don't need to ask your friend for insulin.
No.
You already have access to it.
Exactly.
And I was like, I found that together. I'm like, that's right. Like, if he's using it, you should have it. You don't
Right.
need to ask for it. It's already at your house.
But instead, you
Yeah.
borrow it.
Mm-hmm.
One time only.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, that was great. And then after lunch, we have Kubitschek, which another technical issue. I think he ended up using it on his phone.
His flip flop.
Actually, his assistant's phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't have a
Nice
smartphone.
fella. He's from the same general area as Matthew
Mhm.
Victor.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I want to hear Victor's story.
You do want to hear Victor's story. It's
Yeah.
a great one.
Well, yeah. Community, let's ease up on him a little bit. I mean, that's a tough position to be in. You're basically defending the most hated person in West Virginia. I'll just say it. That's essentially who you're defending. After everyone who critically thinks what they're hearing gets to the end, they're not going to like this person. Now, hate's maybe a strong word. A lot of people are like, I don't hate anybody. But if you do hate people, odds are you're probably going to hate this person. So, tough situation for Victor to be in. But so Kubitschek gets up. Was there any kind of moments that stuck out to you? Did you feel like it helped your case? Or?
We were going to get nothing out of Kubitschek except that he's the guy that is the state medical examiner. We felt like we had to call him, even though he was going to say he was absolutely going to stick to his guns, that undetermined.
Mhm.
And that's what he did. Well, we knew that ahead of time, but we felt like we had to call him anyhow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. And then we end, it seems like Judge Kirk mentioned something, I don't know, some certain kind of donuts. I can't remember. But all of his endings were just the best. I feel like that kind of stuff. Let's talk about Judge Kirk real quick. We're about midway through the days. We're on day 5, but he didn't have to take this case, correct?
Mhm.
I think he actually, not only he, but both the defense and the state wanted him to keep this case. He was so invested in it. He had made so many rulings. He had heard so much testimony. It didn't make any sense to go and start from square one.
Yeah.
And it would have made zero sense for Mike Frobel, who was a brand new judge and took his place, that his first trial would be the Natalie Cochran murder.
Does it make sense that someone starting out would want to stay so far away from this that it's ridiculous? Like, because this seems like something that someone who's wanting to have a long career is if you don't get it right, it's going to be a really big eyesore, or does that not make sense? Is it kind of like Judge Kirk was like, well, I'm retiring anyway. I really could care less. I'm going to finish it out. I want to be here.
I think that Judge Kirkpatrick was so invested
Mhm.
in the case, and really the parties were too, that he maintain it. and the Supreme Court granted that, and it couldn't have worked out any better. Really, no matter, even from the defense perspective, he was the guy to try the case.
I bet he's got some stories. We're going to try to get him in here.
I think he said in his letter to the Supreme Court that nobody else wanted the case. Like none of the other judges wanted to touch this case because it would have been a huge learning curve for them to understand all the previous rulings and also kind of have a general sense of the information. It would have been really, really difficult.
It would have been tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Makes sense. All right, we're into day 5. You all are steamrolling. This is your last day, right? Your last day of presenting?
The day that we rested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you rested on day 5. Either that or in the morning of day 6. I can't.
I think you did at the end.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
You all rested. That was day 5.
We had Uribe and Tim to call.
Uribe looks like he would sell coffins in Tombstone, in the 1800s.
What a witness. What a witness.
I have been dying to ask this because he was the witness. He's the whole reason the case was dropped initially. The indictment was dropped was so that he could look at the case, if I remember correctly. And he was supposed to do like some specialized test. And I was like waiting for that this whole time. And then come to find out that he couldn't do the test because the body was too decomposed. So like when you guys were reading through his like report, was that concerning at all when you found out he couldn't do this test that was supposed to be like, this kind of game changer? Or did you feel like he still, his interpretation of all the evidence still like made his testimony very valuable?
I felt like he still brought quite a lot to the table.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that he had several tests that I think that he wanted to do. One that was important was he wanted to test Michael's vitreous humor in his eyes, see if there was insulin, because that would have been the last part of his body that would have retained insulin.
Do we need to add that to the legislation?
But that'd be a post thing. You can't do that.
It's a postmortem.
Okay.
Well, we can still add it, maybe.
But
I don't know. That's worth. I mean, I am curious about the test. So carry on. Sorry to interrupt.
He was going to check Michael's vitreous humor if there was any left, and see, because that would have again been the last part of his body that would have retained any insulin.
Was that the insulin test that was initially talked about then that they wanted to do, the specialized test?
Vitreous humor.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds like me. But anyway, all right.
It has something to do with liquid in your eyes. That is as deep as I can get on it because I don't want to give anybody incorrect information. But Michael's body was so decomposed by that point, his vitreous humor was gone. I remember when I was already at the office when that autopsy happened. And I remember when Ben had gone out for it and came back and he said, "You never expect a mausoleum to have white carpet when you're doing an exhumation."
It had white carpet?
It was very graphic when he talked about that. Michael's body was very, very decomposed at that point. So no, he was not able to conduct any of the examinations he wanted to. He retained tissue samples from Michael's body and was not able to make slides for microscopic examination because they were effectively useless because of the level of decomposition. That being said, Dr. Uribe also went through and looked at all of the medical records. He read statements that we had. And after he went through all of that and drew his conclusions, we still felt like it was a very solid report.
Right.
And he had a lot of experience.
Yeah. And he also had Krieger's report too.
Yeah.
And I thought Ashley did a great job with him. He was a big witness for us, I think. He brought a lot.
That experience, I thought, like specifically with insulin cases, I thought was
the Clarksburg VA cases were gave him the real bona fides. And Krieger was on that too. So the two of them knew what they were talking about.
I'm pretty sure they done C-peptide in that too.
Well, and they also had a confession.
Yeah. Oh, well,
so
that helps.
That doesn't hurt.
Was it 17? I can't remember how many
it was.
Yeah. Because that's typically what happens in insulin murders is nurses kill patients.
Yeah.
Diabetics. Typically. Now, there are some spouse murders of this, the first one ever reported was a guy who killed his wife I think it was in like the 50s. I can't remember, but yeah. So yeah, your rebate gets up, does a good job. Bledsoe gets up. What are you thinking coming into this? Is there anything you want to like definitely hit on because you know you're about done, or?
God, it's a blur. Like looking back at it, I'm like, what was I thinking? I don't know. Tim and I had been working the entire trial. We had kind of a running outline. And we're trying to think like, these are the points we got to make sure that we hit. We got to tie up any loose ends that we missed. Tim was our catch-all guy. He was very nervous for sure. Because he's been working on this for 6 years.
Yeah. He worked on the Ponzi scheme and the murder investigation, right?
Yeah. And the murder was more his baby and the Ponzi was more Bob's. But you know, Tim and I were a team for this part, and we're just like, okay, hope we don't forget anything important.
Yeah.
What can we get in? And there was definitely, I wanted to get Betsy Britland in.
Yeah, shout out.
That
I don't know who I'm shouting out, but yeah.
R.I.P. Betsy.
R.I.P. Betsy. We love you, Betsy. I'm going to find out more about Betsy before this is over with. We're going to write her a proper obituary.
Yeah.
So if anyone out there, I want to see a photo of Betsy, please. But go ahead.
Yeah. When we found out that Betsy was an actual person that people in the community knew, I went back. This was after the trial. I went back and mentioned that to Tim, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we know."
You know, yeah.
I was like, that would have been nice to know. When I'm just talking about how she's made up.
Yeah.
But we wanted to make sure that we got in, you know, that Natalie was creating fake people for Michael to communicate with.
I don't know what was real at this point. What was real? I mean, she had brown hair. Like, that's all I know. I don't, was that real? I don't know. But yeah.
Was she Native American?
As far as I know, no. I have not found anything that says she was. She said she was.
Right.
But I haven't seen anything that has supported that.
Yeah,
I've never seen a DNA test. I don't know. But.
And she was doing this to gain favor with government contracts,
yes.
or or
she was purporting to gain
that's
favor.
true.
Sure.
She never got any of those federal.
I mean, I think they were like starting. Well, I think she was starting to like, okay, well, let's try this, and then found out pretty soon, like, oh, this ain't gonna work. But I still have the information. What can I do here? Maybe I could, I could get this much money, and then I'll get this much money from this person, and then I'll pay them, and then we'll just see how far, Yeah. But anyway, how all this crap even happens. Multi-level marketing.
Was it Bledsoe
with no product,
or was it Heinzman that said that they had applied for a state contract?
They did get a state contract.
They did, but they never fulfilled
through
it.
Senator Manchin's office.
Yeah.
But they lost it because they couldn't fulfill it.
Okay.
That was the one and only contract they had.
The only one? What was it for?
Was it guns?
I think it was a firearms contract. No, it was computers. I think it was computers.
Yeah.
Computers?
I believe it was a computer.
She done stuff like...
But it could have worked. I mean, like she was set up.
Oh, they could have legitimately run the business, but she didn't.
They couldn't network and get the product to bring in.
That was too much trouble. It was much easier to just get investors and
just to text.
You did it.
To text and be like, gauze, $370 or $3,287. Return $4,684. Do you want in? Yeah, I'll take some of that.
Yeah,
let's go.
It's somewhat like when you were reading throughout. Like, were you like objectively somewhat like fascinated by it all? Just like the levels that she went to lie to her friends, of like throwing out random numbers and like, oh, we're selling this for this much and you'll get this much. Like, it was somewhat impressive, just the levels that she,
She is one of the most accomplished liars I've ever run into.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she really was good at it. And she took in a lot of very smart people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, $500,000 of Chris Davis alone. Salt of the earth, super smart dude. Sold $500,000 to him. I mean, obviously, she's got some salesperson.
Well, it was him and his partners, right?
Him and his partners, yeah.
So, like, it wasn't just him. Like, she got other people who were of similar intelligence.
Dr. Bailey, $624,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she had documents. Like, a lot of people are thinking, like, well, there wasn't much that she was she was showing some numbers,
showing,
QuickBooks reports, and
dummy tax returns, spreadsheets, lists of. I mean, it was all very, very impressive.
Do you have the letter from Manchin? Did you guys ever? Because she said that like she got his approval, right, and he wrote her a letter or something. Did you guys
We
find
have
that?
fake letters from his office.
We do have we have fake
right, the
letters,
fake letters that
and
she-
fake email accounts.
Did you check them?
Oh, Bob did,
Yeah.
and Tim did.
Oh,
I
really?
want to
Yeah.
see the letter from the
You
fake
know,
letter from
and
Manchin.
the fake letters from Bank of America
Mhm.
with the wire transfers and numbers and all that stuff.
Yeah. And
Jumping ahead, but
no, go ahead.
did Thomas Treadway design those? Did he help
That's a
I
good
asked
question.
him, and he said
in
no.
making some of those letterheads?
He
And
says no. He
Mhm.
said no about the Bank of America one, but he is a graphic arts guy.
That was the big question the community had is his connection. So him being non-compliant, we'll call it, probably helped him a lot. Would that be fair to say? Like, I know you brought up, if he's guilty of anything, which he's not, but you brought up the fact that he mentioned to Natalie that the police wouldn't get from me, which was a great Tom Truman moment. I'm glad you just let it all out there because it was cool to hear profanity on court TV from Tom Truman. But
vulgarity.
yeah,
I mean, it was written on the screen. So what are you
Yeah.
gonna do, right?
Yeah.
and you all didn't call him.
No,
Why
didn't
didn't-
call him?
Why didn't you call him?
I put no stock in what he says. And that was readily apparent from a review of the text messages. I think he was so, how do you want to phrase this?
Enthralled, engrossed.
Good and enthralled with Natalie Cochran that he was not a very reliable witness.
Gotcha. And the way I saw the text after of like, it was very odd how he was like, you need to do this, you need to do that, and going back and forth. You know, I know some overbearing people that offer me advice when I don't really want it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of write out like, well, maybe he was doing that. I don't know. But again, that's the thing we'll never really know.
Well, I went back and he's on one of like it's either the football league or the little league. He's a board member as part of one of those. So like their connection started outside of the business, whether or not like because Michael hired him to do some like graphic stuff, but like his connection to the family went beyond that. Like they had a connection through some of the sporting leagues as well.
Sure.
He knew the family outside of that.
Yeah.
Did you ever get a reason why Lacey Treadway didn't show up
Nope.
for the
All
Mercy?
I
phase?
heard that morning that she had meetings that she couldn't get out of. I overheard that being said. I don't know what she does. I don't know where
Gotcha.
she was.
the notary on a lot of those
Well,
documents.
I like to be positive and say, well, maybe she had a change of heart and decided not
Yeah.
to
And
stand up
I've
for a
wondered
murderer.
that too.
Yeah,
And
But she has stood up for her before
yeah.
right, but not
at
in
the sentencing hearing.
She was,
for
yeah.
her federal charges.
But she also lost money too, didn't
Yes.
she?
Yeah.
She, was a victim, but she testified
there was
on
a
Natalie's behalf.
there was a
Yeah.
lot of that.
Yeah.
which is
Very strange.
salespersonship squared. Like
yeah.
you know, you
Mhm.
get
You got to really be good at it.
I mean,
to get
yeah.
those people.
And Lacey was also a board member for the.
Yeah. Yeah.
nuts. All right. So yeah, that was day 6, right?
Yeah, 6.
David
That was
Treadway.
he was part of the first
The defense.
couple of
Yeah.
the defense called, I think.
Bledsoe had a long day on day 5.
Oh, I felt bad for her.
Yeah, he's just like at the end, he's like, "Oh my god, I think." Yeah, I mean, he's just kind of looking tired, and
Mhm.
and I think everyone.
Well, he was
is-
before lunch, and then you're like, "I'll be done by noon." You were done by noon, and then we got back, and it was like 2-3 more hours of, I think, Matthew.
Yeah.
Which
Yep.
was expected.
Yep.
Because I don't know if you remember in one of our earlier hearings that we had, I believe it was the hearing to bring the federal conviction in.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew is crossing Tim on the stand and he says, "That's just a taste." And I was
Oh,
like,
yes.
so
I
we're going to
remember
have a great time. So we kind of knew we were in for a long ride.
Mhm. Yeah, he tells me after, he was like, "That's a taste of what we're going to get at trial."
Yeah.
Like the same thing. Yeah.
It's snapping fingers. Come on in, Victor. Let's talk. So then we get into at the end of the day, they file for dismissal.
They have to.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a procedural mechanism that they have to do. if they want to preserve their appellate rights. And of course, there was no chance.
Okay, so it wasn't anything.
No, that wasn't
Trial-based.
anything nefarious at all. That happens in every trial when the state rests.
Yeah, but Matthew said he wasn't just doing it because it was normal.
That's what he said.
I
But
mean,
what he was doing was just because it
Self-legit.
was
It's normal.
normal.
Yeah.
And Kirkpatrick was like, no thanks. Let's continue.
I mean, there was clearly a prima facie case made by that point. They should have convicted her on the evidence we had put in.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's good to clarify because I think a lot of things like that were rubbing people the wrong way because they didn't realize, like I didn't realize that that's like a thing if you want to hold the right to appeal. All right, so we get into day 6. And I'm not going to lie, I felt like this was a gut punch for you all. Did you all feel that way or not? Because I felt like when the kids got up, that it kind of...
No, I didn't.
That they seemed like loving kids. They'd already lost a dad. They're going to try and hang on to mom as best they can.
Yeah.
And they're the actual testimony, if you really listen to it, I don't think hurt us that bad because it really didn't have a lot of credibility to it.
It was mostly Victor.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
Is that why you allowed it?
I think we had made up our mind that the kids are the kids, and no matter what, we're not gonna.
Imagine that. Like, I'm just sure they were horrified, and they're trying to save their mom. It's their only parent. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So yeah, we could have played lawyer with them,
Right.
and we probably would have been successful on keeping some of that tamped down. But why would we do that? There's a, and it's not. I don't think it put our case at risk. And then Ashley covered a lot of this in the closing. But at the end of the day, 2 kids come up with the word agitated. Really? That just, and they had talked to Cook, the investigator. So there was a common denominator there that we didn't have to say it. It's the old Sam Irvin. You can let people know you got You're drawing a picture of a horse 2 ways. You can draw the picture of the horse and hold it up, or you can draw the picture of the horse and hold it up and say, this is a picture of a horse. We drew the horse.
Right.
Just got out of the way.
Oh, that makes sense. And I'll go through one at a time. So Brianna Hawley, so that was the registered nurse that basically was, they did this to prove that Natalie was on the permissions list for the school. But there wasn't any paperwork.
She wasn't even on their witness list. We had no idea what this lady was going to do. And
how do you put someone up there that could you have objected to that, but you let it go?
We did let it go.
Okay.
And because it just seemed like nonsense.
You didn't even question.
No. When Stanley said, this is what she's going to say, we looked at each other and said, okay, go ahead. And what she was saying, she's a contract substitute nurse, and she's going to be the one that's going to do all these whiz bang things for this kid. That made 0 sense.
And to clarify, did Jennifer ever mention that she wasn't on the list for the school, or?
I don't think she did, but all she really said was that Natalie wasn't authorized to give Gavin medication
and never did.
What they're talking about sounds more like, like a pickup list or something like that you would, sign when your kid goes to school. It doesn't seem like it's the same thing.
And I think your juror interview came to the same conclusion we did. Really? There's no paperwork. You got to have paperwork for everything in a school. And it would have been so easy, just like the cancer. Here's the diagnosis of cancer. Didn't produced by the defense. Here's the paperwork that said the Davises have authorized. That was never done.
Oh, yeah. And schools are so locked down in a good way when it comes to record keeping.
Absolutely.
And, admittance of people into the school alone. So there would be documentation.
And it just, her testimony was meaningless.
Yeah, it just didn't really make a lot of sense. All right. So next we had Nicole, which was the daughter, which we kind of spoke about. We don't have to really get too far into it. I mean, we're kind of the same mindset of like, let these kids at least let them talk.
Yeah.
And you all did. And I think that resonated with the jury when you all do
soft
stuff.
Cross.
Yeah. Yeah. Very soft. really short cross.
It wasn't, yeah.
Yeah. So y'all did perfect. Penny, Natalie's sister, got up and kind of more of the same. I mean, it kind of like was like a mercy thing with the family. It kind of felt like it's like, well, they're kind of just pleading for Natalie and saying how she didn't do this, but also later on with Daphne in particular, start to point the blame at Michael, and I think that's when things really went bad at during the mercy phase.
Well, in Penny's case, a public school employee, and she has no idea how much money she lost. That just struck me as very curious.
Sure.
I mean, those people usually have down to the penny what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, and it's very
same thing Treadway said. You'd have to check with his accountant, buddy. Come on.
It's very evident that. I mean, I'm gonna know. You
better believe it. Funny how the Davises.
511,000.
Yeah.
Donna's got it down.
Donna's got it.
He
69 cents.
Yes,
Yeah.
I caught that.
Yeah. And Tony McCall. I mean, all of these people knew exactly, but mysteriously, those two didn't know.
I just didn't understand. I'm like, you can admit she's a criminal. Like, why are we just jumping a hurdle? Like, we know these things didn't exist. You look at the evidence. If you look at half the evidence, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is all BS. But
and the kids laying it on that Michael was the driving force and all that stuff. One of two ways that was going to get taken care of, either through the defendant's testimony or, as it turned out, through Heinzman.
Sure.
I thought Penny hurt the defense in a way too by that statement where she said there was a dent in like the
countertop.
like that's made of quartz.
Well, Natalie filed an insurance claim.
So you all discovered that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
She filed an insurance and then
it was denied.
She withdrew.
Okay.
Why add insurance fraud to your problem?
Seriously.
Because clearly that had to be nobody on the planet bought into that except Penny.
But again, like Penny makes that statement, but you guys had already set up like you had a PA check his head. There's no injuries. You had Chris Davis, who's, very intelligently describing how he checked Michael and like, no head injuries. But yet
Raleigh General, no header.
Right.
CAMC, no header. I mean, there was just no evidence to support that absurd claim.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, she come up with 4 different stories on how he ended up on the ground.
Yeah.
And one of them included hitting his head on the counter.
Yeah. Leaving a dent.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah. In a countertop, like people are like, you couldn't break this counter with a sledgehammer.
Exactly. And the guy's head does that and there's no damage to his head.
Yeah.
Okie dokie.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know that you all actually saw evidence of an insurance claim and she also pulled it. But did you all look into her? There's a claim that she claimed his tools. And then they ended up finding the tools. Is that true?
Now, that part I don't know about. But she did try and stretch a business policy where she said he was working on a scope and slipped on a rug.
Yeah.
At the time of the collapse. So.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So.
Before he collapsed?
He was working on yes.
In the kitchen.
Yeah.
Is that before he throws up in the sink or after?
Well,
okay,
that part didn't get discussed.
We got this revelation. This is a revelation here. All right. So what is the document that you found that she was writing?
It was a claim form.
Oh, claim form.
It's another insurance.
Before he fell unconscious.
It's the same event.
Same event.
And she's saying that instead of having a seizure or throwing up in the sink or whatever the story is,
he was working on one of their projects with a scope.
And
she put this in a form?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you read it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So that was after he fell unconscious, right?
Yeah. This is after
this is after he died.
Yeah.
He's just trying to get insurance money.
Just getting insurance money.
Wow. Yeah. That's big. Because that's literally her writing down. I mean, that's really like the 6th story. That, or 5th or 6th, but that's nuts. Well, thanks for that. So, and people need to hear this stuff because a lot of this stuff gets lost. They're just like, wait a minute, insulin? What? She stole money. What's going on? It's just so much more than that. All right, so Penny's done. Treadway gets up, which we already talked about, kinda, and it had the I called it a Perry Mason moment for you, which you were like, isn't it true, sir, that you wrote, they won't get from me? Hmm? And he's like, I don't know.
He's like, I don't know what I
said.
said.
No,
No,
thank you.
It says that. Yeah, let me
I
help
don't know
you
what I
out.
said.
Yeah.
He keeps saying, no, thank you. I said, no, thank you.
no,
And Tom's
thank
like, well, actually, I think what you said was.
A little more graphic.
Yeah, and it's important to hear the vulgarity because first, it's Tom saying it, and it's shocking.
Yeah.
Second, it's weird. It's weird to say. It's a weird thing to say in that instance.
Mhm.
But it's consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, he was going to protect his girl no matter what.
Yeah. I guess we got to touch on it. Was there any evidence of a relationship?
I think you can. What was the word you used before? Enamored.
Enamored.
Yeah.
And gross.
I mean, if you read the text messages, he is basically would lick her boots, but she never reciprocated with any of that I remember.
So just
I mean, she would just lead him on a little
an
bit.
unreciprocated flirting, would you say? Or kind
probably
of
goes beyond flirting. I mean, you just get the sense that this guy was,
something weird?
well, he just really liked her a lot.
was
Let's
very
put it that
protective
way.
of her.
Oh yeah, very
Mm.
protective.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's good to know because there's a lot of, and Treadway was involved in that day because he helped her carry him to the car, correct?
Right.
Is that,
To the car, yeah.
Chris carried
Yeah, he was
carried
there.
him to the car.
Was he in the car when they took Michael to the
No,
hospital?
there were only 3 people in that car.
Okay.
which
Chris-
was,
Chris driving, Michael laid out in the back,
Mhm.
and Natalie right next to him.
Which
gotcha.
I have to say, I don't remember which witness it was after, but you all of a sudden putting this theory out that like, well, maybe she gave him insulin on the way. And I was like, he did not just do that.
They didn't
I
like
mean,
that.
it really,
was just like, what?
the
'cause it's
ti-
true.
The timing of that,
Yeah.
with how long it takes hemalog to kick in,
Mhm.
15 minutes.
and look at the results. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but it was certainly an opportunity. There, it's dark, and
Yep.
there's the 2 of them are in the back,
He's unconscious.
and he's unconscious.
Yeah.
I tend to lean toward, I mean, if she does that, good Lord, but I wouldn't put nothing by at this point, but
She knows that nobody's ever going to think that insulin did this.
Mhm.
right. Well, you risk bruising if you was to do that in the car, I think.
Yeah.
Now, you risk bruising anyway. I think if they would have looked, they possibly would have found evidence of a puncture wound. They just didn't know to look.
They did not.
Mhm.
Yeah. And your Rebai said it best. He said it wasn't on their radar. They were concerned about his ability to breathe.
Yeah.
And then when they got the first test results and said, oh my God, his blood sugar's at 21, they pump him up with whatever that is.
DSM 50.
Thanks.
Dextrose.
Yeah.
Did y'all look into the protocol of the hospital or anything like that? Or did anything stick out of like, oh, well,
I think they handled it the way I mean, the focus is not on who would ever think
Mhm.
Right.
insulin. And that's pretty much the way Uribe explained it to us. And he convinced me that that's right. That in a real life emergency
Yeah.
room, your focus is on saving this man's life. And it's not going to be a forensic exam of what's causing that.
sure. That makes sense because there's been a lot of community questions too about the protocol and this and that. So it's
Mhm.
good to know that there wasn't any red flags
Yeah.
that stuck out to you.
And as your campaign is focusing, this is a good time to maybe change some of that, because now that's 2 major cases in West Virginia where insulin was the weapon. And if we can do a test that's not going to slow the hospital people
Yeah.
down, but at the same time determine, this is a causation issue.
It's pretty standard. It'd be an easy test.
It would.
But it's also hearing the law is going to put in the mind of medical professionals of maybe thinking about this a little sooner. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So it's good to know. Like you mentioned, it hasn't happened in West Virginia a lot. It's odd that it was both the same year.
Mhm.
Um,
But there's plenty of laws out there that are, the result of one death or the potential
Sure.
for one death. So it's
Exactly.
not absurd to want to,
Not at all.
every
It's a good idea.
mhm.
almost every law written for coal mine regulation was written in blood.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that's how it happens. Unfortunately. But all right. So the son gets up, more of the same, very emotional. He is pretty much stating that He knew he said he knew Michael took steroids and that's what did this. And, there is no, like, first off, steroids don't lower your blood sugar. But it was very emotional. So I got no gripes. You all handled it.
Ashley handled him with great kindness.
Yeah, a lot of kindness, empathy there, because that gets.
But still, I mean,
lost.
The fact that mom's reading a book and dad's working on the company business, and this 9 or 10-year-old kid knows that, that just didn't fly.
Yeah, it was kind of like, oh, she's poor little housewife. Like, no, you got mountains of evidence. I mean, and I'm sure you all looking at all this evidence just know as soon as you hear it, like, this is not correct. Like, I know 35 instances where this is not correct. And then you're just thinking of how to bring it up in a empathetic way.
Well, it's almost like they forgot she pled guilty to all of this.
Right.
Or they didn't.
Well,
the mom blames it on the car frame.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the kid's defense, I don't think they would ever really connect those dots. I mean, it had to be dad's fault. And he's not here to refute that. So I
think one day they're going to listen to some things. I think one day they're going to listen, and then it's going to be really hard. It is. But I hope so. Because now, granted, whatever they decide to do, thoughts are with them. I totally understand. But I think, like, there's too much. There's just going to be too much, especially after 2020 and after, Dateline does their thing and there's all these documentaries and evidence that's shown. It's just going to be too apparent. All right. So we're into day 7. We got Dr. Dragovich, which this is the defense basically trying to rebut the medical testimony. And it fell flat with me. I think it probably did with everyone who watched it. But, there's a lot of grammatical errors and little things like that. The infant thing that was wrote on the report.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised by Dr. Dragovich's report. In part because when we found out who their expert witnesses were going to be, because you do have to disclose your expert witnesses in advance, I looked them up. Dr. Dragovich was the ME in one of the Kevorkian cases.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, this is
big time.
Like, this is crazy. I'm gonna cross an ME from the worked against Dr. Kevorkian. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, and those who don't know, Kevorkian was the guy who would help people with assisted suicide, and then they eventually charged. I can't remember what happened with the case.
Because that happened, I think I was a kid when those happened.
Right, so. Yeah, a long time ago.
But it was just big name. So I was, starstruck. I thought that was really crazy. And then we get into the report. The initial report that we were sent was just kind of messy, honestly. It was not super thorough, not super in-depth, because our experts, their reports are several pages long. They're very in-depth, very specific about the facts. Dr. Dragovich had facts blatantly wrong. And I don't know if that's because that's how they were provided to him or what that situation was. But, my whole thing was, you created a second report after you were asked to explain why our experts were wrong. That's an issue for me. And how can you make an adequate finding of what you think happened if you do not have all of the facts or all of the correct facts? So that was... I don't want to say it was an easy witness to dispose of, because I don't think any witness is, and I don't want to say that about a person.
They are for you, Ashley.
But
come on
now.
But that was just something that I didn't think really presented a big challenge to our case.
Sure. Well,
when did he get the case? Because I feel like it was very late in the game, like the end of 24.
Well, he didn't write a report till January.
Like right, like the week before the trial or something.
Now, how long he had it before that, I don't. They kept saying, we're going to give you our witness.
Yeah.
But they never did.
And the deadline for that was December 31st.
They didn't make it. So.
Right. So, yeah,
they did make it. They just didn't have a report.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
So that gets us all the way to lunch. And then we have Dr. Halsey, which was
helpful to the state.
Yeah, very, very helpful. It essentially proves she didn't have cancer. I'll say it. Y'all don't have to say it. She didn't have cancer, okay? She didn't have it. She doesn't have it. She didn't. And if she does now, she don't know about it. But anyway, so he gets up and he basically says, the cancer records, they looked for him, couldn't find any. Was there anything else that stuck out other than that you all felt benefited you?
Yeah, I think so. The fact that he gave her an injection and then sent her home with pills that Michael was allergic to.
Yeah, because there was text evidence of her saying, Michael took 2 of my blood pressure pills. He's napping, So I think she definitely drugged him. And then,
probably
that's how he got the shot.
Because he had benzos in a urine test, which is a very crude test, but it's enough to say that a guy that's allergic to this and it's in his system, that's hard to explain.
Now, I wonder if she knew he was allergic.
Oh, yeah. She did.
It had been in his medical records.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Why didn't you guys call him?
Call who?
Halsey.
We didn't think we needed him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You didn't think it'd be so awesome when he'd get up there.
Well, it was much better for he became our witness.
Yeah.
From the defense perspective, he played it absolutely straight. He just told what he knew.
Yeah, I bet Victor was like giving himself the finger in his head. He's like, "What did you do?"
He's giving. Stanley was responsible for all the medical guys.
Yep.
That's right.
Now, those two don't always get along anyhow. So,
oh man, I want to get him in here. Come on, y'all. So, all right. So Halsey goes, very impactful. And then we have Priya
Banerjee.
I keep saying her name wrong. I know I do.
Banerjee.
Yeah, Banerjee.
So she gets up, and then Jozy, how'd you put it? She kind of like started a business of.
She's like a professional expert witness, right?
Correct.
I think that's how you would say that. She was or still does autopsies for like the state she lives in, but her main source of, I guess you could say, income is to be a professional expert witness, specifically for forensic
Handy.
pathology.
It's like the Walmart of murderers. To be like, hey, no, or potentially non-murderers. Obviously, she's going to be professional.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'll take the other side of the Walmart metaphor. You know what her bill was?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, I'm so glad.
$45,000.
Yes.
That the state pays, right?
The Public Defender Corporation.
Yeah.
No.
Is there no limit to what they can?
They have filed a motion for that.
They have to file a motion. I think Judge Kirkpatrick felt like he had no choice but to sign the order.
People just choked on their nachos now, hearing that information.
Now, we paid out of our budget. Dr. Krieger was $4,100. Dr. Uribe, who not only did tons of work with us, but came here and physically testified, rented a car and stayed in a motel, his total bill was $9,100.
So you all are not only effective, you're
financially efficient.
Financially efficient, yeah.
And we had better witnesses.
Here's my question. Okay, and y'all can answer this however you want. Is there an allotted amount that someone is provided that they can spend? Like, how does that get approved? Like, we really need this. Of course, it's better than a couch. It's at least helping a citizen try their case.
Keep in mind now, this is Public Defender Corporation money. Mm-hmm. The defense was paid not with taxpayer money per se, but it's Public Defender Corporation.
Thanks for clarifying that. What is that?
Funded by?
They are partially funded by the state, but a lot of it is from jail fees, court costs, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's not like it comes out of your income tax.
Gotcha.
But this is a lady who stole $3 million.
Exactly.
Yes.
But and the defense needs to have a pool of money for expert witness.
Mm-hmm.
But I about bit my cigar in half when I saw that bill.
So you physically saw like,
we saw the order paying it.
Yeah, it was. It's filed. It's e-filed.
And then again, she was hired on very late, like compared to the amount of time she spent with the case. It wasn't near as close to what your two expert witnesses spent.
Not even close. Yeah. I hesitate to do this, but I'll quote my wife. At the end of her testimony, when I came home that day, she said, I think this lady's just in it for the money. That's the way she came off. And that's, as it turned out, and we didn't have any idea what she was charging then.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what
Mm-hmm.
it looked like. She was right.
There's a lot of upset people right now hearing that. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And to be fair on your side, like it is customary that you do pay expert witnesses.
Yes.
Like that's a very normal.
Absolutely.
You pay for their time, you pay
Right.
for their expertise. Like that's not you buying a witness. That's
No.
Yeah.
That's
and-
Natalie Cochran money.
I mean 45,000 is a lot, but like
it's a
you know,
lot. But
5,000, 9,000. Yeah.
Yeah, and they both Krieger and Uribe were expert witnesses,
Mhm.
but I thought they were a bargain for
Yeah.
what we got from them. And Uribe emailed us back and forth. He talked to us on the phone.
He's texting me the whole
Yeah,
after he's testified, let me know what's going on.
He was just a very involved witness. It
Mhm.
wasn't just showing up, testifying, give me my check, and
Mhm.
call it a day.
Right. Well, I mean, and again, everyone's entitled to the best defense possible. Well, man, you have a financially incentivized purpose to say a certain thing. I'll just say that.
Well,
I mean-
I got to tell you, both the defense experts and Dr. Kubitschek, they were so much in a little silo. It all had to be on the basis of only on an autopsy, dig it up, cut it,
Mhm.
look at it. And if they couldn't find it that way, it didn't exist.
That's why it should
And
be.
that was just flat out wrong.
Yeah. Well, I thought
Even though she said we don't do these things in a black hole, but then she would turn
Yeah.
around and wouldn't admit that any of this stuff mattered.
Right.
Well, she also did something that I don't know if it's frowned upon or not, but like she tried to discredit Krieger by saying like, well, she doesn't deal with dead people. But then she begins to start explaining insulin. Well, I read the manufacturer's thing. And I wanted to be like, well, why are you now trying to like jump into Krieger's field? That is like, she deals with insulin all the time. Like she knows how the pancreas, like it just kind of like put me off to like see her diss one profession while then try to like explain it,
I know. Out of her field.
Right.
Yep.
And we found out that she made the chart, which I was like, this makes sense now.
Plus, that's where the kind of the Oswald the single bullet theory must have come from. I don't
Mhm.
know where we never
Yeah.
said ever that there was one injection of insulin, period, and it had happened at noon.
Right.
We never said that. But that whole chart
I said
that
it.
she came up with
Is based on.
is based on that theory.
Right.
And there was no evidence to support that.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's my emotion talking. But yeah, that makes sense. So do you know the total amount that she spent on her defense?
Oh, I have no idea.
Now, the information you said, that's public information, right?
It is.
That'll be
Yeah, it's-
like
it's-
someone can
Yeah,
pull
you can,
that.
go, you can go look at the file and see the order where it's to pay
What's
them.
the hourly? Like it's this. Does the state set the hourly rate for appointed attorneys?
For
I
a ton,
Or do
yeah.
they? Okay.
For appointed attorneys, they do, but now experts,
Okay.
that's a different story.
But as far as what Matthew and Stanley were paid, it's
They were paid by a flat hourly
rate, which I'm
Mhm.
sure it was several. I can't imagine over.
Well, they had
4 or
a bunch
5
of time.
years.
I
in
mean,
it.
yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of time. They
Mhm.
need to get paid.
Right.
And, I get that. But my goodness. I mean, that's like, let me order, y'all kind of went to Temu. And then they went
But you got
to
the good
like
quality.
the
Yeah.
big. They went to like Dolce and Gabbana and was like, let's get that good stuff.
But
which-
it just didn't quite pan out the way they
Mhm.
had it drawn up.
right, right, yeah. I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't worth the money.
Well, it was interesting. She went into, so all of the theories that Krieger discredited through like a very scientific process, Banerjee was,
She tried to resurrect them again.
she
Yeah,
was like, oh
I
yeah,
agree.
the pancreas, you just don't know. It
Yeah.
decomposes. There could have been a tumor. And like every single theory that had already been discredited, she brought back and like
Correct.
brought new life into it.
yeah,
But
And I'm
with
s-
no support.
Exactly.
and,
Right.
And I'm sure she's a very intelligent person, entrepreneur.
And I'm just talking with her. She's a really, really nice lady.
She was
and has
very
a
nice.
very
Yeah.
varied experiences
Mhm.
in life.
She was knitting in the courtroom.
Yes, she was.
She
She
was
brought
very
her dog
charismatic.
with her.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So she was,
She did
Won
not
Ashley over right away.
Oh.
She did not like the West Virginia weather though. She was like, "Oh, this is terrible. I'm from
Well,
Like,
she
where's
was
she from?
She was from Rhode Island.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a tropical paradise.
Yeah.
Right.
But she likes the city, and so
Yeah, she does like the
didn't like our
city.
snow and our little small town
Yeah.
charm.
That's okay. Does she go to Tudor's Biscuit World? Do you know? I
I don't
know
think she
Judge
did.
Kirk brought in a smorgasbord of biscuits.
Mhm, I
I did
heard
tell her to go to Black Sheep Burrito because she was staying in Charleston.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Go to
that's a
Black
good one.
Sheep.
Yes.
So,
Very good. Very good. All right, y'all. We're almost there. I promise. You're doing so good. People are going to love this. So we're into day 8, and this is the was this the rebuttal witness that you all brought? Yeah, you
The
all
defense
brought
has
in.
to rest though first,
Yeah.
right?
Once they
Well, yeah, the
rested,
defense. So
And learn Natalie is not testifying.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
Did you know that night though, or did you find out that morning that she was testifying?
was she supposed to on
Yeah,
day
no.
8?
like over the weekend.
Yeah, there was rumors, but then it
Okay.
wasn't official.
Because what day
Didn't they
Yep.
take Friday off?
is Banerjee was? How am I saying? Is that her name?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Monday.
Was she the last? Was she like a Thursday or Friday?
She was
then?
like she was Monday, wasn't she?
Oh gosh.
So I'm trying
you
to
know
think how
what?
that-
I
'cause
can't remember.
I know they ended after that, and then we thought it'd be Natalie, but it was close to the end of the day,
Yeah.
and so we didn't know for sure. I'm trying to remember,
Yeah,
but anyways, the next day,
maybe worth looking. No,
yeah,
no.
I'm trying to.
It's
I'm
worth.
just trying to.
It's worth to think about. So, yeah, she's not going to testify. The defense ends up resting.
Mhm.
You all fire up your rebuttal witness, which Betsy Britlin was brought up in again. And your main purpose, we already talked about, was to show that the children
they were wrong.
didn't
Mhm.
I
know
mean,
about.
without beating up on the kids.
The business.
They were just wrong.
Mhm.
And we had Bob Heinzman just bang, 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 laid out those text messages to show that. Plus, Michael was getting the same text messages that the victims in the Ponzi
Yeah.
scheme were getting.
Can I call him Bob? I'm going to call him Bob.
Yeah, that's what he.
Yeah.
I like
He
Bob.
also got a little bit more into the fact that after Michael's death,
And that was very important too,
Yes.
because she was if he was running it, how
Right.
come all of a sudden without missing a beat,
Mhm.
things go on?
Yeah. And very quickly after his, it's not like she took the time to figure out how he was, if he was, which he wasn't.
No.
But she moved on
That
right
was
away.
readily
to-
apparent.
Mhm.
And that was the purpose of his testimony,
As
was
well.
to show that really all of the defense stuff was nonsense.
Yep. And then, so we do that. They give the state and the defense rests. They give jury instructions, and then you give closing arguments. When Ashley was like, I'm going to shut this door real quick and then dust my shoulders off. We're going to be done with this. Let's get out of here. We got things to do.
Mhm.
And we talked about it earlier, so we don't have to go back into it.
Well, but I think Ashley's closing was so devastating to the defense, it really knocked them off.
Yep.
I mean, it was hard
Mhm.
for them to get up and say anything that would counter what they had just heard.
It
Yeah.
was so well organized.
Oh,
That's what I loved about this. After all of the back and forth, it followed that timeline. And I was like, this is what I've been wanting this whole time.
Mm.
And I asked for it, right? I was like,
Yeah.
can I have this PowerPoint?
well,
please.
it painted such a vivid picture.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one thing that someone should listen to, it's not 2020. It's the close that Ashley did.
absolutely. That is the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole thing is laid out in the most organized little neat package.
Right.
And then Victor gets up, gives his close. I felt like it's very weak. It was just kind of throwing shade at everybody and, and not really presenting any theories like they've done the whole trial. So I don't feel like, it was like chess and checkers, really, to me. With all due respect.
Three-dimensional chess and
Yeah.
checkers.
Yeah. Well, New York Yankees versus like Maxwell Hill,
Right.
Panthers.
Mhm.
The Red Sox fans in my house.
Oh, nice. Well, you don't like Cubs? How does that
Cubs
work?
are fine. I went to a couple Cubs games the year they won the World Series,
Okay,
so it was all
nice.
right. Just not a Yankees fan.
Right. Okay. Screw the Yankees. Now. All
Well,
right. I like who Ashley likes.
My cousin played for them.
You know what? Your cousin can kick rock. Okay. Yankees suck. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, they do. Actually, I used to love the Diamondbacks, but I have kind of fell out.
Hot take.
Yeah, I did because my brother went to school. This is so not even worth saying. He went to school with a guy, played baseball with him that ended up being a pitcher there, and he won the Cy Young. His name's Brandon Webb. played when Randy Johnson played.
Yeah.
So it was just real cool. It's like, hey, there's the one guy I know. So that's why I liked him. All right. So we go into Tom, who brings up the infamous 0 because on the close, the state gets to rebut.
Yes.
Correct.
You get the last
Correct.
word.
And then you took the rebut.
I did.
The rebut. Is that the word?
Rebuttal.
The rebuttal. That makes more sense. And then that's when we get the numbers that we talked about, 0 and 21. I think it just reiterated the fact. And then the jury decides we're tired.
Yes.
We're going to go home. We need to think
Yeah.
about this, which was a very smart decision because I think everyone was like,
It was a long day too.
It was a lot.
And by that time, it's a cumulative effect.
Mm-hmm.
That was basically the last month of our lives. We're just kind of
Yeah.
drained.
Yes, it was good for them. Plus, I think they got to go home and think
Yeah, they
about
did.
it. Like, because I don't think they would have been able to come to a verdict that day. They probably would have had to go home, like maybe deliberate for an hour,
Yeah.
go home, and then
It's
yeah,
I
it was
think
the
that
best
would have been
decision.
tough.
Yeah.
did you sleep?
No. I've still been having a hard time sleeping since this
Yeah.
was over. It's
It's hard to quit
hard to
thinking,
come down
ain't it?
from.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's very hard to come down from.
I could imagine, and I had no skin. Like, I know none of these people. But for me, like last night, I was thinking, we got another anonymous interview coming up, and I'm thinking of like the random ways that we can have this little cartoon with their mouth moving so we can at least have some kind of, and I'm like, my goodness, it's 4:30 in the morning. Can I please go to bed? And like you actually have, real repercussions. I mean, not repercussions, but kind of personally, like you feel like you would feel bad if you lost.
There was a lot of weight on us for this,
Mhm.
for sure. But like I said, we left it all out there. So we
Shoot
did
ya.
everything we could do.
Slate it. They go back to deliberate. What are you thinking?
I do not make a habit of predicting what a jury is going to say. I learned that the hard way with my first trial because we lost it. We thought for sure they were going to come back and say guilty, and they did not, and that sucked. So after that, I vowed I would never again try to predict what a jury was going to say. We go back. We're all sitting at the office in our various places. I'm sitting in my assistant's office because I just can't bring myself to walk up to the 3rd floor. I don't have it in me. I'm afraid I'm going to fall down the steps if I do. So I just sit there and we just wait. So that's all I can do.
Good call.
I can't do anything else but sit there and wait. I can't focus on other cases. Like, this is it.
Smoking cigarette, like.
I'm like hyperventilating. I'm sitting right there. I've got my phone next to me. I wasn't expecting me to be the one that got the call,
Mhm.
Right.
but I was. And I looked
What's
down
the
and I
call?
see it. When the verdict comes in.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. We were actually, we have this bad little kind of gambling habit.
Heck yeah, DraftKings.
where we get everybody's opinion on how long the jury is going to be out.
Mhm.
Right.
But no real money is exchanged.
No,
Let's
just
be clear.
yeah.
we
no,
don't need a
nobody's-
stethoscope.
It's like a fun.
There's nothing actually put into
Oh,
it. It's
yeah.
just like we're all guessing.
Yeah.
Like you get bragging rights if you get it right. You know,
Mhm.
if you're the closest.
I mean, you got to do something to keep from going crazy.
yeah.
So yeah, that
And
makes
so
sense.
we've been sitting there for about an hour and a half at that
Mhm.
point, and we're like, okay, well, let's just start asking everybody what they think. And my assistant Tabitha starts calling around to the offices within our office, and I see Judge Polling's judicial assistant Sarah Robertson. Her name pops up on my phone, and I'm like, oh man.
Mhm.
I was like, Tabitha, get off the phone. This is the call. And I stand up and I take it, and she's like, we have a verdict. And I realize as I've stood up that I have not been breathing.
That's a
And I'm
problem.
like, this is it. Like, I've been thinking I was going to pass out the whole time. And I'm like, oh, this is actually where I'm going to pass out. So I had to drop back into my chair. And I was like, get off the phone, call Tom.
Check
We
your blood
gotta go.
sugar. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that was a wild couple of hours.
It's interesting you say you couldn't do anything because so I stayed in the courtroom the whole time. I'm trying to like prepare like some like shell stories to publish when it comes out. But Matthew has his investigator, and I don't know how many cases he has right now,
Mhm.
but he's working on other cases. That's how he filled his time.
Nope.
I don't know if that was like I can't think about this, so I'm going to think about something else. But it's just like the contrast between you guys.
Yeah.
I can't speak for what Tom was doing. I don't know. We were not in the same room, but I was not able to focus on anything
Tom
else.
was puffing the cigarette. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so what is all right, so obviously, if someone's listening to this at 3 hours and 20 minutes, they know Natalie was convicted, what does it feel like when you hear guilty? Not just a guilty. You know, you don't hear Judge Kirk come unglued really until the enunciation
Yeah. He
of
said
the
it with a lot of
word.
vigor.
Yeah.
He really did.
It was nice. Thank you, Judge. I mean, he's done that before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You could tell.
A time or two.
What does that feel like for you? Do you have this rush of like,
Yes. For me, I still haven't watched my reaction. I don't know if it's like on camera somewhere or not. But I know that I had tears in my eyes, and I was like, I can't cry. I cannot cry in here. I have to keep my composure. I have to stay like, but I can hear Donna behind me. And when I hear her breaking down, I'm like I still haven't cried over this verdict, and I feel like I'm going to sometime. Like it's coming, but the air just goes out of the room.
Yep. Well, you're fighting for her. She couldn't say anything.
Yeah.
So like you're sitting there and you hear her. I imagine that's like, this is like, of course it sucks we lost Michael. We wish we weren't here, but at least the system worked.
Well, and the
You know
whole
what I mean?
time that we're doing this, Donna has been texting me the whole time we've been preparing and everything else. And she keeps saying, Ashley, we got to get her. We got to get her. And the only thought in my head when that verdict comes across is we got her. That's it. That's all I can think. And that just had to sit there with it. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at Tom. I'm in total disbelief. I'm like, holy crap. Like
We did it.
we did it. We did what nobody thought could be done.
Did you think them coming back early worked for you or against you? Or did you not think at all?
I didn't think.
Because it was done. It
I
was right under 2 hours, right? Yeah.
Like
I was definitely
11-ish. Started at like 9:30. Before noon, we had a verdict.
But,
Yeah.
but I was, like I said, I was encouraged by some of the jurors' reactions during closing. So I figured we had something.
So they was wearing it on their face. They was like,
Yeah.
oh, they did not do that.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that, which I don't think they could see Natalie. Could they?
No,
From the box?
I think half of the jury could see her because they were on the it's a long rectangle. So I think if you were on the far side, you could probably see Natalie.
Yeah.
But most of them were like they probably couldn't even see the defense attorneys at all.
Yeah.
Right. So that leads us into the mercy phase, which is completely. I felt like they should have started it this day. Did you, or did you kind of?
We couldn't. Defense
you can't?
did not have. Well, the defense did not have their witnesses available.
That's right.
And they have to go first.
Is that the one where he said they weren't available and
When
they was
they were
right
right
behind?
behind
him?
you.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
yeah.
you said that like you want to look behind you.
Yeah.
Everyone's there.
Yeah, but you know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably a good idea because
Mhm.
that whole day was long.
It was a long day.
And they decided, so we can go through, we got to do it since we're here because we're not going to make y'all come back again. So we got to go through the mercy part. So is there anyone on the defense side that stuck out to you of like, oh, she may get it? Or were you kind of like, we don't really have to do anything, but we're going to let all these people talk that haven't been allowed to talk? Like, what was the feeling after that morning?
I thought the kids were probably their best shot. And I don't know that they didn't carry the day, but that was probably, I thought, her best shot. I thought the aunt hurt her. I thought her mom hurt her.
What about the religious
That was the aunt.
aspect?
Mhm.
Yes. So y'all picked
Ten
up on that.
Commandments.
Oh, well, obviously you picked up on it because Ashley got up and was like,
Oh, yeah.
She could have just done the snap after she said it. Like it was
Yeah.
just that perfect of a delivery. It's like, this is the only thing I need to ask, and I know exactly how I'm going to ask it. And basically, for those who don't know, the aunt was kind of insinuating that Jesus was going to judge the jury for not
Correct.
granting mercy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, they were already. She alluded to the fact that the jury was already being judged for giving
The
murder.
wrong verdict.
right.
Yeah.
So now they didn't want another strike against them.
Yeah.
That's what. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have. So let me do a quick skim here. So, and a majority of them, I'll just say, it was like really sad. Penny was sad, but also said she wasn't a victim, which was weird. Daphne said she wasn't. She was like, or I forget who crossed. It may have been Tom and said, "How much money did you lose?"
Yeah.
$276. $276,000.
Mhm.
Like, and you're not a victim? No. And I'm like, Lord, is this love that I'm feeling, or is this my bank account like completely gone? But anyway.
Well, mom's testimony was about 10% about Natalie and the rest about mom.
That's true.
And I didn't think that was helpful to the defense at all.
Yeah. And the you know, I pretty much wrote include everything but the kitchen sink except she's guilty.
Yeah.
Which no one said. I think Selden kind of was like, we know she's been convicted.
Well, Daphne said that Natalie was innocent of the Ponzi scheme as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They blatantly asked her a question where she said, did she commit the financial crime? No. Did she commit murder? No. I'm like, why are we here? This is not working out. I thought that was very, very bad. They had a friend that met her post Michael's death.
Yeah.
That hired her. Is that correct?
To work in her antique store.
To work in the antique store. I didn't really get anything from that. It was like her kid dated my kid, and I didn't really feel like she knew.
She was good with customers.
Right.
Well, no kidding.
The jury.
She
threatened the jury.
Yeah.
She said you got it wrong. And I was like, hold on a minute.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
You people are too stupid to get the case right the first time. We'll give you another shot.
Well, you mentioned, and I think she's going to regret it, but you mentioned a mentally healthy Natalie Cochran, or you want her selling cars all day. You want her on your lot selling cars. Like, of course she's going to be great at it. But you know, the whole sociopath thing kind of becomes a problem after a while. So, the niece, which was sad, it was basically Natalie called me when my dog died. I hate when pets die. The dad, we already talked about. Larry was very sad. And then, Natalie Cochran, the son, which was sad. And Nicole, the daughter. And then we go to lunch break, and then it's the prosecution's turn. And you all were basically like, get up there, say what you want to say. And then the objections started flying. And you just felt this frustration of like, my goodness, she's convicted. Can these people speak?
Right.
And the jury felt that too. Everybody's tired. They're like, are you kidding? But
that's not typical, is it? Like for a mercy phase to have that many objections from either side?
Not usually. I mean, that was I was a little surprised by that tactic, but again, I don't think it hurt the state. I think it actually helped the state. You're trying to suppress information at this phase. We've already decided her guilt.
Yeah.
And you're going to not let these people talk?
They retried they were saying that y'all were retrying the case, but they were retrying the case. It's like, we're convicted. Can these people speak about their friend goodness and how they were hurt? So yeah, Stephanie and JD go up.
Chris Davis.
Chris was like,
he was excellent.
Devastating.
Yeah.
I mean, he could hardly, you could just see him thinking about his friend the entire time.
I felt a lot of guilt about that because I knew what was coming, but we really needed him. Because we are good friends. And I was just felt guilty, but really needed him.
Yeah, because people don't know, like, Chris is like a big time lawyer. Like, he helped with the opioid settlement I told people about, where he represented 4 different counties in the $400 million settlement.
Including Raleigh.
Yeah, including Raleigh. So, I mean, like, this dude knows his stuff. And it was very cool that you allowed him the ability to speak on the ethics complaint, which was quickly dismissed, that Natalie filed on him. And she would call him a snake in the grass to people and all kinds of just random stuff like that. But yeah.
Chris, too, with him, he said, I trust the jury. You've heard everything. I trust you. As opposed to the defense that was,
you're going to hell.
Trying to kill. So it was a nice, to just be like, listen, you made the decision already. Finish your job. I trust you. That was I think the jury really responded to that.
I do too.
It was very authentic.
Yes, it was.
That's a good word. Chris was authentic.
It was like they were treated with respect.
Correct.
It's like, you are in this decision.
Right.
No one else is. Yeah. We're not going to, because I know me, I said, if they grant mercy, I'm fine with it. I'm not going to tell this jury, bless you.
Thank you.
I'm not going to tell this jury anything. I mean, I totally don't blame them for anywhere they go. Now, toward the end, I was like, I mean, come on now. So yeah, Tony McCall gets up, who was the victim. That's the first time we hear from her. So that was very impactful. about the scholarship
Kids.
and the leukemia. Yeah.
And the father figure.
That Michael was.
That
We finally get
Michael
to talk
was.
about Michael.
Yeah. That was so nice,
Yep.
finally.
I do have to ask you about Ed Bolt, and you know what moment I'm about to bring up.
Yes,
Were
I
you
did.
questioning him?
Yes. Yeah. I love the Bolts. I have grown to
The best.
have a very, close relationship with them throughout this trial. And I know, nothing's going to bring Michael back. I knew what he was going to say. We all knew what he was going to say. I honestly, I don't know what I was afraid of. I knew an objection was going to come for sure.
Oh, they weren't going to object. They were
I was
like,
just-
go ahead,
Say it. And I was afraid that he was going to maybe get in trouble for threatening her.
Mm.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what was going to come out of it, but I was like, you know what? We better just move on.
Yeah.
It just seemed like it was best to just stop.
You did perfect.
Yeah.
Because I know watching, I was like, oh, you're doing so good. You're doing so good. Oh. Like, that's what you felt. And you
Yeah.
knew like
Yeah.
that was the point of crossing the line, and you felt that, and you did
But
perfect.
Ed,
So-
he could kind of feel it too.
Yeah,
I feel
he was
like
waiting.
He was
He's
like,
like, oh,
all right, I
yeah.
get it. He's like, I said
He
my,
knew.
you're like, it was like a mutual, like, okay. And then
Close enough.
Yeah.
In Ed's respect,
He's, yeah.
a lot of people in West Virginia knows where he's coming from.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, granted, we don't advocate for violence ever, but Ed lost essentially his son too.
Mhm.
That the defense not only Natalie murdered him, but she said he didn't even like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he went, I want to learn, I hope they come in because I want to learn what about those shoes.
About the
He didn't get
shoes.
to tell the shoe story and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So Ed did a good job. He held it together
Mm.
and said what he needed to say. And then Donna gets up, and the first thing they do is object to the photos, which I think Judge Kirk would have allowed if they didn't object. I don't know, though.
I came a little unhinged at that point. I was a little unhappy. Because
Yeah, it was demonstrative evidence.
Yeah.
The fact that it was never marked and admitted is irrelevant.
Mhm.
And that I was actually surprised that the judge wouldn't allow that, but he didn't, and fix it and move on.
yeah.
Sure. And that's
It-
kind of how I was. Is like, if Judge Kirk says it, like, that's just how it has to be. 'Cause
Yeah.
Exactly.
I just trusted.
Exactly.
He was trying to give the benefit of the doubt for this woman that was just convicted of murder. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but at the same time, Donna has rights too, and it's often overshadowed. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's
Yeah,
like,
we're
let
at
her
the
have her pictures.
sentencing phase.
Yeah.
This is not a substantive issue as to
Right.
guilt
They
or
already
innocence. It is what happens next. And but that's all right.
I mean,
was
it
the
hurt
judge's
them.
ruling, and we moved on.
Yeah. I think it made them look very insensitive.
Mhm.
And the part of it that bothered me was that they said I was putting the photos up to inflame the jury
Yeah.
when you put up photos of his autopsy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I was unhappy.
What did they give Donna a warning?
Yes.
They did.
Everyone in the courtroom got a warning.
It was
Okay.
a vague warning, though.
Yeah.
It was like,
But we told her. Like,
Oh, you
it's
did?
going to
Okay.
be his autopsy photo.
I didn't,
So
I missed that because I felt like he was alluded to. I missed the interaction between you two, but I did see the daughter walk out.
That's good to know. But like, what a strong woman to sit there and
Oh.
say, nope, I'm not leaving. I do
Mhm.
not care. This lady is going to be
Mhm.
convicted, and I'm going to watch the whole thing. And it was just, and
Had
she
she
could put her photos up.
Had
Yeah.
she seen that before?
I don't
The
know.
autopsy?
I don't know.
I doubt it.
I imagine
but I don't
not.
know.
But I agree. I think the courtroom needed to feel her.
Mhm.
They needed to be there as she felt those emotions.
I'm glad the judge allowed it because he could have removed her, right? I mean, he could have. But
for
goodness.
having an outburst.
Yes.
What
He
surprised
could
me is the
have.
defense didn't say
They
anything
didn't-
about
yeah.
it. They object to everything under the sun,
Yeah.
and not that.
I think as soon as he did it, he was like,
Mistake.
shoot.
Yeah.
Off.
Big mistake.
It's like, we
Yeah.
gotta get this off here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
I think we took a
love to know
break
what they were
after.
thinking of.
Soon after that, too.
We will definitely get to that question when they come in, Josie.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. All right. So Donna gives an amazing, heartfelt speech, reveals so many details, just sadistic stuff of Natalie talking about pinching his balls when giving him a bath and all of this stuff that's just like, my goodness, sent to the wrong hospital, which, maybe I could I get lost, but she's a nurse. She knows where these hospitals are. So Natalie knew what she was doing. But so she does really heartfelt testimony. Everyone in America felt it. And then Bob gets up, and then the point of this was, what was the point of this?
The ongoing scheme. It's not only conduct before, conduct for the murder, what's she probably going to do?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why I think Heinzman's testimony was helpful.
Because if he chose, I don't think he'd have done this. If he'd have chose concurrent, she'd only done what, like 4 years or something for this?
Like that.
If mercy was granted.
Yeah.
If mercy was granted.
And I got to give Stanley Selden his due. In my 44 years since I came into being a prosecutor, I had never objected to a closing, but he kept saying that over and over, like it's going to be 15 years. There was no way to know that.
Yeah.
And that just, one more time he said it. I said, that's it.
And there was no way to know because the judge hasn't ruled yet. Is that why?
Mm-hmm.
Or
An effective sentence date involves prior credit or credit for prior time served.
right.
He has a wide range of dates he could pick. The earliest of which is when she went on a ankle bracelet. Now, generally, you'd have to get the state's agreement to that, but it's possible she would have gotten all of that time when she was out flitting about Raleigh County with an ankle bracelet.
It's like mid 2020.
Yeah, all the way up until May of 21 when she was actually had to turn herself into the Bureau of Prisons.
Right.
So it could have been that date. It could have been the date she turned herself into the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been when she's discharged from her federal sentence.
Mm-hmm.
All of that makes a huge difference. Anywhere from 4 to 19 years to be parole eligible. As it turned out, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
But Stanley kept implying to that jury that no matter what, it was going to be 15 years going forward from today or some other nebulous time.
Sure.
And that was just nonsense.
And then my dude got up and said, the taxes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Louis Grizzard line struck through my head. The writer from Atlanta. Damn, brother, don't believe I'd have said that.
I don't think it played out. The jury was like,
What
we're
are
fine
you-
with that. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
we'll put our tax dollars.
Like,
to-
oh yeah, a convicted murderer and
Yeah.
financial fraudsters behind bars. Yeah, we'll pay for that one. Now, nonviolent drug crimes. Yeah, you may have a point there.
Mhm.
I can get behind that. But yeah. So you give your close, which was to the point.
Mhm.
You all know the things. We totally are behind you. Whatever you decide, you all pick. It was quick, which was good. And then Selden gets up and, like I mentioned, other than that, he throws out, I don't know, a list of 10 different things on why, we should give her mercy.
Yeah. He's honestly though, like he starts by doing what I feel like his witnesses should have done, which is like, I'm begging you, give this woman mercy, please. I'm like, that's what his witnesses should have done instead of,
It's
blame
Michael's
this or
fault.
blame that.
Yeah.
Right.
And like we mentioned, it was the only time that he said, now she's been convicted. That's the only time that it was mentioned that whole day. It wasn't she did it.
Mhm.
It was she was convicted for it. So
Well, and this is Jessup's testimony about, well, those victims would have got their money back, but the government took all the stuff.
Yeah. Well, the government scammed Natalie and Michael. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. And then
Not helpful.
No.
it's not helpful too for all the people that lost so much and they're still being
that
told
money.
they're not victims.
Yeah.
It's just all of this stuff is just not going to work. I mean, if their goal, I'm trying to bring up that list I made of the mercy phase. I'm going to bring it up here. Let me see. I've posted so much crap, Ashley. But anyway, so Selden gets up. He talks about, a general summation of the whole thing was, Natalie didn't commit fraud. Natalie helped, this place in Zambia or something, and Natalie didn't, do the murder. The tax dollars are too high. She called me when my dog died. Her kid dated my kid. Everything but she did it. They go back. Are you pretty much like, yeah, there's no way?
So anecdotally, I was very nervous about the mercy phase the whole time because we had a trial a couple years ago. Rashad Thompson, who was convicted of killing a mentally disabled 7-year-old child.
Oh my goodness.
And he had bludgeoned him with a hammer.
I covered that. Were you second chair?
No, I did not work on that trial. I think Morgan might have been second chair on that trial, actually. But that was before I was at the prosecutor's office. And that was actually also Matthew and Stanley.
It was.
He was given mercy.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And
why?
my fear, I'm sitting there the whole time knowing that we have to go through this mercy phase. And I'm thinking, if a man who bludgeoned a 7-year-old with a hammer was given mercy, you know, what are people going to do with her? Because I think people also feel that they have a moral obligation when the word mercy is thrown around. I can't imagine how hard of a decision that must have been for them.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
the juror said they wish it was just parole or no parole.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, too, they actually had photos of the crime scene of like the blood. Like it was very, very graphic. And but the witnesses for the defense spoke to his character, and they understood the fact that he was guilty. Yeah. But they said like he's a good guy. He's never done anything wrong. Like they really played it up, and he got mercy, and it was very surprising.
And I think that was the difference.
Yeah,
that he was found guilty. We know he was found guilty, but here's the reasons that we think that he deserves another shot, and that didn't happen here.
Well, thankfully she gets life, success. You all job complete. Have you started to wind down yet, or is it still like?
No.
Because now there's going to be appeals into infinity and beyond. How does that process work? Like, what all can she appeal? How many times can she appeal?
Well, after the 25th, when the post-trial motions, and we're anticipating that Judge Kirkpatrick is not going to set aside the verdict or the penalty, then she'll appeal to the Supreme Court, and who knows?
Do they accept all cases, or do they kind of decide based on evidence?
They will, on a direct appeal of a first degree with no mercy, they'll take this case and review it and probably issue a written opinion.
Right.
That a signed opinion. That'll take some time. And the Attorney General's office represents the state on appeal.
Yeah. Do you think she has a chance on a retrial? What are we thinking? I mean, obviously it was open and shut for me, but I don't know anything.
Judge Kirkpatrick is a wise, and he has a very good track record of his decisions sticking. That's not always true of judges in this jurisdiction. There are some who get reversed quite frequently, and deservedly so. But he's careful, he's fair, and there's a couple things that are usually brought up on appeal, like jury instructions, and there's not much of a beef about the jury instructions. They were very tight, very short, to the point. The argument on jury instructions was almost non-existent.
Right.
And so it was pretty much an agreed upon charge to the jury. They'll bring up the change of venue. Well, we got a jury in 2 days. Yeah. Why would we have to change venue? I mean, clearly we found that they picked the jury and did not object to any of these people.
Sure. So
that one is going to be tough for the defense. And their last minute sequester the jury motion, unless they've got some kind of evidence we don't know about, there's no reason to think that those people didn't obey the court's instructions. None.
Yeah. It sounds like everything went legit. I mean, from what I heard, everyone really took it serious. They collaborated and listened to the facts and let the system play through. I think we witnessed that. And she put in there they put because Natalie already appealed for everyone who's listening. It had like 7 or 8 reasons.
It's actually post-trial motions.
Yep.
This is to set aside the verdict. Technically, she hasn't appealed anything.
Mhm.
I know one of the local stations kept saying that, but that's really not quite accurate.
Mhm.
That this is a prerequisite, a step that they have to take to perfect an appeal.
Gotcha.
So, and it makes sense if you think about it. Why would you go forward with an appeal when the trial judge may say, oh,
Mhm.
you know what? Looking back, we shouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you a new trial.
So the stuff she filed, Kirk is going to decide.
Yeah.
Judge Kirk will be, okay. So, I mean, I would imagine it'll essentially fall flat, but they even put the pictures that Donna put up in the Mercy phase.
As like a reason.
And Ashley's demonstrative evidence of the syringes, which they used.
Yeah.
You pointed that out. Yeah.
Yeah, because you all quickly rebutted that publicly, all the reasons, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I've mentioned appeal because I'm stupid, y'all. I have no clue what I'm talking about.
No. It's a technical. It's a technical thing that, and to be honest with you, once we're done with the trial, it becomes the attorney general's issue.
Mm-hmm.
I would not want to be an assistant attorney general that has to go through this file, and that it's a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it is a bunch.
Yeah.
Super lot. All right. I think we're to today, y'all. What's the goal? What are you gonna like? Go see movies more? Or are you gonna relax? Like, what's the goal for this year?
One of the things is this is our office is staffed for 4 circuit judges, and for a month we were servicing 5, and things just got the office pulled together and did a great job of covering stuff. But there are things that I'm sure stacked up on Ashley's desk. I know what my situation is because this was our lives for the most part for 4 months, but especially the last month.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just a lot of stuff to dig out of.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. A lot of catch up to be played for sure.
A lot of catch up to be played.
Just it's hard to get back into the routine of what we were doing before because I'm like, that part of my brain feels like it's been filled up with Natalie Cochran.
Right.
I got to dump that out and get ready to move on to the next one.
It's a lot.
It is so much. But outside of work, I mean, I don't know. I want to take better care of myself and get my anxiety under control.
Same.
So that's a priority for sure. But we've been spending a lot of time with friends and family since the verdict came out. I've been connecting with a lot of people that I've never met before, which has been really cool. And also a little intimidating because,
Ashley will never buy another beer in this town.
Oh, no. You're good. Yeah, you're good.
It seems like everywhere we go,
it's how it should be.
Says something.
This was so emotional for this community.
Yeah,
I mean,
think so.
That's why people are so invested in it, is because everyone knows someone essentially who was hurt in some way.
Mm-hmm. Or I think people can relate. People can relate to Jennifer helping out a friend.
Yeah.
Stephanie wanting to be there. Chris loving his, people can, even if they didn't know, they can relate to what they went through and they feel that pain. And I think they appreciate what you guys did.
You're spot on with that. I mean, people really can relate to those.
Yeah.
That makes sense because it's all West Virginia qualities.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's what we do.
Exactly.
Like with the insulin, I crowdfunded insulin one time when I didn't have insurance. I was like, hey, we really need, and people helped me out. Yeah. So that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great point. All right. Ashley Acord 2028. Is that what it is? What year is it?
26.
26.
Yeah.
Oh, we got
the unexpired term.
We got to get going. No pressure.
I don't want all that management stuff like Tom was talking about. I love having a docket and doing all of my cases.
Well,
I don't know. We'll see.
She's the Roy Hobbs of trial lawyers.
That's right. Well,
I think we have to ask too, what was that like? I'm sure you guys watched yesterday, what was that like, seeing all the hard work that you put in, on a national stage, and watching that play out, being interviewed. How did you feel about that?
That has been really cool. It has been strange. It was really, we had a watch party at my husband's aunt and uncle's house with his parents and hung out there, and it was my mother-in-law was listening to it, and she says, "Hey, you know, whose voice is that?" And I'm sitting there like, "Oh, you know, I can't figure it out." And she's like, "It's yours, dummy." Like, so it's a way that I've never seen myself before, for sure. And you know, we've gotten a lot of compliments. A lot of people have, you know, texted and called me and said, "Hey, like, you know, you and Tom did great. You represented us well." And that's really awesome because, you know, West Virginia gets a lot of bad press on a national and international stage. So, like, yes, it's bad that we, you know, just had a murder, but to see people so interested in the way that we conducted this trial and the way that we came into it and our backstory and everything, it's really, really neat.
Well, we are so proud. The system worked flawlessly. Thank you all for your tireless efforts. I know there's a lot of things that we don't know about that went into this, that you all staying up late, you know, getting yelled at or whatever. I mean, just, we really appreciate it. We really nailed it. I think we did it, Jozy. I think we've got everything we need. We got everything we need on the public file from the prosecutors. Anyone else? If you were involved in the Natalie Cochran trial in any way, we'd like to get people on here to talk about the sports scandal. I think we need to really open that up.
Yeah.
Please reach out. Let me know. And everyone else, please like this video. Subscribe to Creepalachia. Thank you, Ashley, for reaching out to me and giving me some kind. I appreciate y'all going local. Okay. Because I like the national narrative. I feel the same way. We get a lot of negative press, and I felt like, well, there's a lot of people that need to express their fullest extent without edits, and I think that's what we're getting the chance to do, and hopefully causing some change.
Well, and your point's a good one. I mean, it's you know, one time there was an article in Charleston about changing the state slogan, and one of the suggestions was "Thank God for Mississippi," because we're always down near the bottom with them. I think this trial showed the professionalism on all levels, really. We did a good job. The system did a good job. Your point is valid.
Yeah, the bailiffs, the clerks, you know, the people you're not seeing that mop the floors.
Yeah.
You know, they got to make sure people don't fall. Everything was seamless, and thank you for not embarrassing us.
The only problem was equipment.
Oh gosh.
The projector is trash. Okay. Let's just say that. Trash. And you all still won. So shout out.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Let's wrap it up. Like this video. Subscribe to Creepalachia. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. Leave a review there. That does a lot of great things in helping people find us. And we're on Facebook. We got a really good community building there. There's going to be a lot of things we're trying to pass with this hopefully Michael Brandon Cochran legislation that may be coming up. But be sure to follow us there and on Instagram. And above all else, everyone, please remember, long live Appalachia.